Good evening and welcome to the January 19th, 2022 School Committee meeting. Tracy, everyone is in attendance with the exception of MJ Burns. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Our first item of business, we have our student representatives from the middle school, David Dinan and Isabella Zaya.
Student Council held its first door decorating contest for the year. This activity saw full participation from staff and students. The building was extremely festive and it surely demonstrated a strong sense of school community. Judges had their work cut out for them. We would like to thank Dr. Quirk and Dr. Brand for taking time to visit every door in the Wilmington Middle School. The competition was tough, but 3 classrooms earned trophies and bragging rights. This year, we recognized 3 outstanding classrooms for their efforts. The first honorable mention was awarded to Miss G and the students of room 321. The judges found themselves in front of a roaring fire complete with fire-like crackling fire sounds and holiday music. The second honorable mention was awarded to Mr. DeFabio and the students of room 340. The life-size figures of Santa the Grinch and his trusty sidekick Max were outstanding. A huge congratulations goes out to Mr. McDonald and the students in room 222 for their cool and buff reindeer and VIP list. All doors were creatively decorated. Winners, be ready for next time.
The Wilmington Middle School is proud to announce this year's production of Beauty and the Beast. Auditions took place before winter break and the company is in full swing of rehearsals. We are looking forward to the curtain rising on this production. Congratulations to the Wilmington Middle School math team. They scored a perfect score on the team round, with the team captain having a perfect score. World Culture Club will be holding their next meeting and are looking forward to preparing a celebration of the Chinese New Year. After-school sports have been kicking into gear. With the cold weather upon us, the gym is a perfect place for the Wilmington Middle School students to get their sports on. We look forward to seeing all grade levels.
Much for telling us what's happening at the middle school. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Can you tell us what sports are being played right now in PE?
Sorts of sports that the kids get to choose what games they want to play.
I heard pickleball might be. Is that accurate? Pickleball seems to be very popular in Wilmington these days. Excellent. Thank you very, very much. We appreciate you being here and taking time out of your schedule to come join us. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Excellent work. Thank you so much. All right, we have some approval of items by consensus. Approval of minutes, January 12th, 2021, 2022. Yeah, sorry. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. David, Mr. Ragsdale, thank you.
Next item is public comment. We have one person signed up to deliver public comment here, Jeffrey Cohen.
Good evening. Diversity, equity, inclusion are 3 initiatives being utilized in Wilmington schools. None of these focus on the core components of education, which are English, math, history, and science. None of these contribute to individual academic achievement. None of these can be objectively measured, which should be a requirement in any strategic plan. How is it even possible to determine if a goal has been achieved? So-called diversity is the presence of differences that may include race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, etc. None of these are measurable. So-called equity is promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within procedures, processes, and distribution of resources by institutions or systems. None of these are measurable. So-called inclusion is an outcome to ensure those that are diverse feel and or are welcomed. Once again, subjective measurements are only possible. Who determines the definition and characteristics of a diverse individual? If a group is underrepresented in our schools, it's not prima facie evidence of systemic racism, white supremacy, or oppression. If this committee was serious about diversity, it would insist It would not insist on the indoctrination of students and parents into a single mindset, much like the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Where is the focus? Focus on intellectual achievement, freedom of thought. You should be rejecting the lie that systemic racism exists in this country. It does not. What exists today are a small number of isolated instances over a period of decades, and that by definition is not systemic racism. To assume anything else is a gross misrepresentation of this country's history, and it denigrates all the progress that we have made. Unlike so-called equity, equality is codified under U.S. law in the Civil Rights Act. So-called equity is nebulous and strives for equal outcomes without regard to individuality, while equality focuses on equal opportunity for all individuals. If your goal is to achieve a minimum standard of DEI, shouldn't there be measurable goals? Why do any of these belong in an academic setting? The correct answer is they don't. This committee has lost their way. Perhaps the upcoming school committee election in April will result in some new academic-minded individuals on this committee. There are 3 positions up for grabs, and I hope that all concerned parents are listening. The election registration deadline is fast approaching. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment who is present? The committee also received 3 written comments in addition that will appear in the minutes and that we have read before the meeting.
Approval of minutes, January 12th, 2022. Thank you, Mrs. Plowman, seconded by Mrs. Newhouse. All in favor? That is unanimous. Approval of disposal of OIT surplus equipment. Thank you, Mr. Smaha, second by Mrs. Plowman. All in favor? That's unanimous. Approval of disposal of tables at the Wilmington Middle School. Thank you, Mr. Fennelly, seconded by Mr. Smaha. All in favor? That's unanimous. We have some warrants, G16, R14, 15, 16, L56, 57, 58, 59, 60, and FS 44. Thank you, Mr. Fennelly, seconded by Mrs. Newhouse. All in favor? That is unanimous. Payroll ending 1/19/2022. Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale, seconded by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor? That is unanimous. And we have SPED 15, 16, 17. Mr. Fennelly, seconded by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? And that is unanimous. All right, thank you. That brings us to our superintendent's report. Dr. Brand.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Just 2 items tonight under the superintendent's report. One is listed, and I'll start with that and then add a brief update from the Department of Education. The SEAM Collaborative is an organization, as members of the committee know, that we are a part of, along with a number of other districts in the area. We are very fortunate for our participation in and partnership with those other communities, and the annual report is included in this agenda tonight and in the packet. This is informational only. There's no action that we're seeking or I'm seeking from you tonight, but as is normally the case, following the executive director's provision of this, all of the participating districts bring it forth to the school committees respectively. So that's why it is here tonight. I'll pause there. If there are any questions that I certainly can try and answer regarding the report.
Mr. Ragsdale.
No comment on the report itself, but just when this topic comes up, I do like to just state my appreciation for what membership in the SEAM Collaborative gains us and reiterate my support of our belonging here. We get a lot of great benefits from it.
We do, thank you. I think as each year passes and there's another opportunity to learn more about the value added, if you will, aspects of our partnership, I could not agree with you more on that. We're very fortunate to have a great resource right really in our backyard here.
Any other comments?
The second item, seeing none, the second item, again, not listed, but just to take this opportunity to provide the committee with a very brief update. There's certainly been, I know within the news, a number of reports regarding the recent Department of Education's announcement on the unveiling, if you will, or the release of a new testing program. This just happened earlier this week, so there's a bit of a whirlwind right now as districts across the Commonwealth try to come to grips with what this option exactly entails. There's not a lot more information to be able to share with you or the community tonight, but I will just say a couple of things. The new testing program that Decile announced earlier this week has conditions upon school districts' ability to participate. And those two conditions are that as a school district, you either need to be participating in pooled testing or symptomatic testing. Those are two testing programs or testing approaches, if you will, that districts throughout the Commonwealth considered participating in. Many have not. We are a district that opted not, through discussion here with this school committee and presentation a number of months back, opted not to participate in pooled testing, nor are we currently participating in symptomatic testing. So that leaves us in an interesting position in place right now because we, as a school district, are not eligible to participate in or join the new testing program. So we are going to be exploring options, and when I say we, the Board of Health with Ms. Newhouse, Dr. Curto, our school physician, and of course Ms. Brown, in the coming days, and I expect to be able to be at a point by the end of the week to be able to share an update with the community around where I think we're going with that. So not much more to be able to share with you right now. I know interest is high on this new program, and stay tuned for more information on that. And that's it for Superintendent's report tonight, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are on that second item.
Any questions or comments?
Is it, or would it be possible, I know we're going to get more information on this, but I know you're saying that the pooled or symptomatic testing needs to be already something that's happening. Is that something that we could opt into and then proceed with the program? And sort of that's sort of what the conversations are going to be?
Yeah, great question. I'm sorry I didn't mention that, but yes, it does seem very clear after participating in a webinar today with the Department of Education that school districts that are not currently in or participating in or offering either of those two testing options, it's certainly not too late to pursue either. And quite frankly, that's what we now find ourselves at a place to explore and consider. So thanks for the question.
To our next item. Yeah, do you want to, so we have the Wilmington High School graduation recommendations following the program review presentation. Ms. Peters and I think many other representatives are here to help with this. We're excited to see you all. Thanks for being here. And you want to introduce?
Sure, I will. Thank you as Ms. Peters comes forward. So we do have two items tonight under old business, although they're really not old business per se, but following the approach that we try and do with the format, structure, and the content of what falls under old business. These are two items that, by all intents and purposes, have been here before you, but they're certainly extensive, and bear with us, if you will, as we move through both of these presentations in order, starting with the Wilmington High School recommendations following the program review. I'm going to sort of set the stage with just a brief introduction and then turn it over to Ms. Peters. She again has company, and we thank many curriculum leaders who are here tonight that will, again, like took place last time when this item was before you, they'll be here to provide an update on their findings, their recommendations. So with that, to start, just again, sort of context setting, why is this here? Why are we talking about this now? This falls under one of the 4 district improvement goals that I presented to this committee back in the fall, and ultimately you approved. Goals that really were foremost at the sort of the level of priority for my work, amongst other things in the district. And the focus of this goal was to take the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper around our Wilmington High School program and course offerings and scheduling. And really the intention behind this was a couple of fold, but to start with, to ensure that going forward, our program of studies and the experience that we provide for the students that will pass through these doors in the years to come, to make sure that the program here is aligned with the vision of the graduate, that faculty and staff under the leadership of Ms. Peters have been very hard at work, as you know, as part of the NEASC accreditation process. We also wanted to make sure and to take the opportunity to pause and to do a check of the landscape, if you will, to make sure that what we are providing for our students matches that of similar experiences of comparative high schools in the area. So it was an opportunity, something that hadn't been done in some time, to sort of take stock and do a 360-degree review, if you will, or scan of what else is out there for other high schools. The folks that are in this room that you'll hear from, and many others, their colleagues who are not here tonight, have worked really hard over the last number of months to dig into this project, and I just want to thank them for their collective efforts and participation to do so. Taking on additional projects, I recognize at this time is still very, very difficult for lots of understandable reasons, but my thanks to all at the Wilmington High School and those that worked as part of this project. So the focus of the review, Ms. Peters, thanks. The next slide. Just as, again, sort of some reminders, the focus of this review, when it was proposed to you and as you heard previously about, was really to focus in on and identify any gaps, if you will, or areas of recommendation by department that were collectively felt to be those that we should consider going forward to help bolster or strengthen even further the experience for students here at the high school. We would categorize these as really falling into two categories, if you will. Minor adjustments or changes, which you'll hear and see of in a few moments. For example, the course sequence in a department. And a secondary category is something that's more major, and that certainly would fall into the realm of looking to have the school committee's approval. I'll just point out that the school committee in this district, as is, I'm pretty certain, all districts, does have an important role in approving the course of studies as well as the graduation requirements from students from high schools. And so it's really that as the backdrop of why this is here tonight. The final point before turning over to Ms. Peters is just a review of the timeline that was proposed for this project. And what you can see there is we're actually a little bit ahead of what was originally anticipated. And just to provide a brief explanation for that, after further sort of walking through the possibilities here, recognizing that there are some specific timelines that the high school needs to adhere to, Ms. Peters needs to adhere to, in terms of ensuring that the program is approved and that the next steps to, believe it or not, prepare for next year's students and next year's programming fall into place. So we made a couple of adjustments to the date. And as you can see, we're here on January 19th, not next week as originally thought. And what you'll hear tonight and the slides that follow is really the culmination of the good work that was done and the recommendations that at this point are being presented and provided to you. So with that, Ms. Peters.
Thank you. Thank you for having us again tonight. I'm going to start by calling Ms. Mia Parvianen up to speak to you about the English department proposals.
Good evening, everyone. The English department took a look at the various programs of studies from area schools. We are doing a lot of work with our English 9 and 10 curriculum and have been over the past couple years, especially in light of the Next Gen MCAS. And so our primary focus in looking at the other programs of studies was to see what schools were doing for upperclassmen. We looked at electives. We also looked at how they structured, in particular, senior year. And we noticed that a lot of schools offer one of two pathways for students in their senior year, counting towards their 4 years of English. One of them is a universal capstone project that's centered on an essential question or a common theme. The second pathway is a senior seminar, which is, if you think about it, kind of like how when students go to college, they get to take a course aligned to a topic of interest to them. And a lot of schools offer seminars that are aligned to particular genres, themes, or modes of writing. In talking through these options initially, while we like both options, we are currently exploring the seminar option. It's complex and there are a lot of moving parts, and so we're spending a good portion of this year looking at various options. We have pulled together a wide variety of types of courses that have run in other districts. We have knocked out some that we feel overlap with what we're doing in English 9, 10, and 11. And we're really considering what courses might be appealing to our students, what might best support their needs and interests. We're hoping to have some focus groups later in the year to talk to students about their particular interest. We might hear some pitches and ideas from them as well. Our hope is that by the end of this academic year, we'll decide on a format. We will have landed on a few course options that we believe will be viable. And then for the following program of studies, we'll have something ready to go. So the current sophomores, their senior year, would be able to take advantage of this.
Probably best, sorry to jump in, it's probably best to take questions.
Well, I
We're gonna
was
have a
like, I think
turnstile
that's
of
time
folks.
for us.
So,
Are there questions or comments from the committee? Mr. Samaha?
So I guess my question is, I know you're sort of exploring this idea of the two different options for that senior year. In the meeting on the February 16th, are you going to have narrowed it down? Are you going to have selected that option by then, or is that something, I guess as I'm looking at the timeline, maybe I should look at that a little more
We're anticipating it's going to run probably further out than that. We have an upcoming department meeting, so we have it narrowed down to a list of 10 that we might shorten even further. We would still require time to have students take a look and take a pass at it. So at our next bit of departmental time, the idea is to kind of take a look at, here's what we're intending to present before students, what recommendation, what edits would we want to make? Do we want to swap things around or drop anything or add anything?
That makes sense. And I say, I you know, as an English teacher, I really like this idea. I too think that seminar thing might direct kids towards, you know, an area of interest, maybe some sort of passion for them. And I just think that it's, you know, it's a really good preparation for them, whether they're going to college or just, you know, gaining some of those skills to be able to get out into, you know, that some of the demands of college might have, or anything, you know, just entering the conversations that we have, you know, in the world today. So I think it's fantastic. So I was really happy to see these changes.
Can you give some examples of some of the senior seminars that you saw in other schools that looked particularly attractive to you, that made you want to possibly introduce them here?
Certainly. A few that we have looked at and discussed. For example, some courses have journalism as an option, which would tie into the school paper, which we think would be a fantastic opportunity for some of our students. There are some courses that are focused on Shakespeare and its intersections with pop culture. While we do have Shakespeare plays at the senior level, having that added contemporary component could be of high interest. We have a potential option of war and literature. We do recognize that we have a lot of students with a deep interest in history, so there are a lot of great connections they can make. One option is for memoir and creative nonfiction. Memoir is a growing genre. There's a lot that students can do. There's another option for horror, crime, and mystery. We do have a lot of students that gravitate towards Stephen King, and so those are some of the examples that we're considering.
Are there any implications on staffing and staff sort of experience or expertise and training in doing something like this?
We're not anticipating any particular staffing needs. I will be asking the department to take an honest look at the options we're considering and see who would be interested. If it's the case that there's an option that looks great, but nobody's interested in running the course or developing it, obviously that would be cause for concern. Developing courses is a lot of work. I've done it before. But I also know that there are some people in the department that have looked at these options, and you can see them light up and say, I want to teach this course. So there is a high level of interest and investment in a good number of these options.
Did I hear you correctly say that you're seeking student input into some of these decisions?
Yes.
Would it be sort of the upperclassmen that won't be here but say, oh, I really wish we would have had this? Is it the lower class, or is it sort of a mix of everybody?
I'm thinking about it in two different directions. I'm thinking about talking to seniors who have seen the full range, but I would also love to talk to sophomores because they're the ones who would be piloting this. I'd love to see what their interest is. I'm hoping to maybe do a bit of a mock sign-up, because again, if nobody's interested in a particular course, why make it run?
That's great, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. In the first slide, you mentioned the Universal Capstone Project, which you said that is not the path that you're going to go in.
We're open to it.
Open to it.
And I think the general plan is that if the seminar option is not viable, because it is complex, and it could be, we don't want it to be a scheduling nightmare, that it's a great option, it's just not one that we're super passionate about, and it's an option that would take less time to develop. So in the event that we spend the time invested, do the due diligence on this option, and realize it's not going to be viable, it's not going to take as much effort to develop that kind of a project.
The Universal Capstone Project, is that different than the Universal Senior Project on the second slide, or is it the same thing?
It's different
It's
from.
different.
Yes, it would be a different process.
So the Universal Capstone, can you just explain the difference to me about the Universal Capstone versus the Universal Senior Project?
Are you talking about the senior projects that they complete?
I don't know.
at the
So
end?
on the first slide, it just said a Universal Capstone Project centered on an essential question. And then on the second slide, it says decide on a format, example, senior seminars that run 1 year, or a Universal Senior Project. So I guess I'm just trying to get clarification. Is the senior project the same as the capstone project?
Sorry, I'm trying to
Sorry.
take the slide here.
I'm going too fast. So that slide says Universal Capstone, and then the next slide,
Okay.
the next slide.
I took this to be something different because
I thought it was
the
different,
regular senior
too.
projects are often
Right.
not English
We're
related in
trying to
their.
decide between one or the other.
Okay. So the examples here in the second one, the Universal Senior Project is different from what would be a capstone?
Yes.
Okay, I
Yeah.
understand, thank you. And here it says CP only, so that's the college prep only, meaning that this might not,
Correct.
for
So
AP?
we're talking about, AP exists in its own kind of realm because
Yeah.
they have the course exam and description that we have to run by. The question is whether or not we would fold this into an honors and a CP option. Would we cross-list sections where the differentiation would be made based on rubrics and based on criteria? There are a lot of moving parts. We're talking about what the best possible format would be.
thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? So, and I do have one more. And so this is really about grade 12, which means that we're pretty happy with 9, 10, 11.
9 and 10, we did run the question, maybe in the future, if the seminar option takes off. There are some schools that open it up to juniors as well, and that is a possibility for the future, but we want to see how this runs first for seniors.
Got it, which would be our current sophomores.
Correct.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. We good? All right.
Thank
so
you
much.
I'm going to ask Mrs. Faluk to come up to speak about the proposals from the math department.
Hello.
Hi.
So we kind of looked at a whole bunch of things for the math department. The number one that we're going that we're looking forward going forward with is to eliminate the integrated math program. This was laid out. It's been in place for a few years, I think, as long as I've been in Wilmington. And it's not what Department of Ed has laid out for an integrated program to be. It's fallen into a lower level course that students who are really struggling, who really should be having remediation and supplementation within the general ed classroom, they've been pushed off into another class. So we want to get them up with their peers. You know, there's a lot of research showing that students learn more from higher level peers in the classroom with them. So we want to get them back into a full Algebra 1 course. The district did have more success with students in their successive learning when all of our students who did not take Algebra 1 at the middle school took it at the high school in their 9th grade year. Going off of that, we would like to offer an honors level for the Algebra 1 course for a number of reasons. Students, when they're placed into the accelerated track that's done at the end of 6th grade, and there are students who develop quite a bit between 6th grade and the time they get into high school. And pigeonholing them into the CP track as young as 12 isn't always the right path for everybody. Ms. Peters, if you could go to the next slide. I did a couple of diagrams to show the difference. So this is right now what our pathways look like for our Math 8 students. I'm not looking at changing the pathway for our accelerated students who take Algebra 1 in the 8th grade. So they're still going to do Algebra 1 in 8th grade, Honors Geometry 9, Honors Algebra 2 10, Honors Pre-Calc 11, Honors or AP Calculus 12th grade. What I'm looking at changing is the students who are in Math 8. So right now, students who are in Math 8, they either go to the integrated math program or CP Algebra 1. And you can see from this diagram that the only way to get to calculus or into the honors program at all, for that matter, is to double up during their 10th grade year, taking CP Geometry and Honors Algebra 2 at the same time. That's a lot to ask of our students. I took that path, I remember in high school. That was a lot. Especially when you're going from that CP level course in 8th grade, really, and 9th grade, to double up with that Honors Algebra 2 course, which is quite fast-paced. And most of our students end up in the CP Algebra 2 and usually CP Algebra 3 or math topics. What we're proposing, I've put on the next slide, you can see offers a lot more crossover. There's a lot more on it, and it looks a lot more overwhelming, but it's offering students a lot more opportunity to go from the CP track to the honors track. Not only are we offering an Honors Algebra 1 course for our freshmen, allowing them to enter, but we're allowing them to jump over to the honors track at any point, should they show us at the high school level that they are ready for it. A lot of times that we feel once they go through us with Algebra 1 and geometry, that they're able to make that transition to the honors level. And you can see it just offers up a lot more opportunity for them. They still have the opportunity to get to calculus by doubling up. We do have some students that do it and are successful, but they're not, if they don't jump over to that track, they're not just pigeonholed into the CP level course. They can take the Honors Algebra 2, they can take the Honors Geometry, they can take the Honors or CP Pre-Calculus class. So those are the major changes. The other ones that were listed, we'd like to offer a financial algebra course, different than the managing your money requirement that we already have. Applications of algebra in finance, in investment, we found that that would be a valuable elective. We would open that up to 10th to 12th grade students. And we'd also like to expand our computer science and computer programming offerings. Right now, we just have a couple of courses, the computer science principles mainly, and we're offering it through VHS. We'd like to be able to offer computer science principles, computer science A, and some computer programming courses to our students in person. If we're trying to keep students in the district, these are the types of courses that they want, that they're looking for, and that they're getting outside at those private schools and at the technical schools, and we need to offer them within our district. I think I have a timeline on the last. Yeah, so this school year, or for the next school year, I should say, again, we're looking to eliminate the Integrated Math 1 and offer the Honors Algebra 1 course. The following school year, 23-24, is when we would eliminate Integrated Math 2. We still need to offer it next year for the students who are in Pathway 1, Integrated Math 1 right now. Also, with that school year, I would like to, or we would like to offer the financial algebra course and offer our additional computer science and principles programming, whatever that may look like. Questions?
Thank you so much, Mrs. Bond.
Can you help us understand the financial algebra course? So if a student, what would a student be looking at in terms of their future, like college tracks and things like that, that course would actually set
Yeah,
them
I
up
would
with?
imagine that it would be somebody who might be interested in finance, in investments, going into those math-specific careers, or even someone that's just interested in it for themselves, learning about what, right now in managing your money, they learn about student loans, but maybe looking further into those, looking at the applications of the stock market and what does that look like in real life, and how does what we learn in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 apply in real life too, especially with our finances.
Just a follow-up to that, that financial algebra elective would be in addition to one of those other courses
Correct, yes.
in that path too, so they'd be taking like two.
Right, exactly, and we would consider that to be an elective type of course.
And is that your same idea for the computers, any of the computer science?
Yes.
Stuff? Okay. I would just, as a comment, I like a lot of these changes. I like the idea of not pigeonholing kids, because I know just from when my own kids were in middle school and sort of, moving up, I had one in the accelerated and one who wasn't, so it was kind of like, it's kind of like they're big decisions in 7th grade that could influence the courses that they take in high school. So I'm really glad to see a shift in this, and even when they get to the high school, being able to you know, that one slide, I think it's a lot of
Yeah.
crossing
And I know,
around.
'cause-
But I think it's fantastic that, you know, you're not, you know, just like you don't want to pigeonhole the seventh grader, you don't want to pigeonhole the freshman.
Right, and all my time in the middle school, you know, we had a lot of students who were in Math 8 that were right on the cusp, and we weren't really sure. You know, as it stands right now, we were having students take an Algebra 1 Flex course with VHS over the summer, and it's an 8-week condensed course, and it does not do a good enough job. Algebra 1 is the key for every other math course. So this will get those students the full Algebra 1 course that they need to be successful. And it allows them to get into that honors level track without being like, oh, do we just want to throw them in? Because we want them to be successful.
Thank you.
And just to, I completely agree with Jay and sort of this, not putting kids in a certain box so early on. Can you explain to me that there'll still be these accelerated options at the middle school?
Yes,
So that won't change?
correct.
And that will start in grade 7?
Yeah, the end of grade 6 is when they place them for the start of grade 7
Yeah.
for the enhanced.
Yeah.
So they'll be enhanced and Math 7, and then Algebra 1 with Math 8.
And then how does this show when those 8th graders who are not in enhanced math come in?
So they have the option of going to Algebra 1, which is what they do now.
Yeah.
Or we're gonna offer an honors level course, which will be more accelerated. It'll be ideally in line with what the 8th grade teaches, because that's an honors paced course, down there. We'll do some more complex, you know, obscure things that you might not necessarily teach or see in the CP level course. I imagine that it would be faster paced, more rigorous. I also like that it puts the math department more in line with all of the other departments in terms of the CP and honors offerings for our freshmen.
No, I agree, totally
Yeah.
agree. And so those accelerated students are still, nothing's really changing for them?
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
the students that we place into the accelerated program in 7th grade, they're gonna continue with the same path. We're happy with what that path is doing right now.
Okay.
So they will take honors geometry their 10th grade year, which is a course ahead.
Got it. But now we're not limiting the students who chose.
Correct.
Maybe weren't chosen or chose not to, right? 'Cause there are some
Didn't
students
feel they were ready.
who didn't want to do that.
Right.
And to have them decide in grade 7, that's actually not what I want to spend my time doing. It's okay, right? Like if we're prioritizing social emotional health and someone says, actually, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to do AP. I just want, that's
We have
okay,
students that
right?
choose that, you know, when they're going into 9th grade too, and so maybe 10th or 11th grade, they want to try the honors level
Right.
course.
I guess as a parent, I didn't realize that making that choice in grade 7 actually put them in that position, to be quite honest. So I'm kind of sitting here going, oh, interesting, I didn't know. I actually thought it was a choice. I thought that kids actually said, you know, I know they were chosen or they were recommended, but you were recommended, then you choose yes or no. And it's actually, if you choose no, well, actually, you're setting yourself off now for the next 4 years and maybe not the same path had you said yes. So I do think it's actually, I think some of us are probably like, oh, I didn't actually quite realize that. So I really do appreciate you taking this seriously and giving such young kids, right, 11, 12 years old, to make this choice for themselves, like when they get to high school, when it's probably more appropriate for them to be deciding. So I think that's a great change. I'm really supportive of that. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Ragsdale?
So the financial algebra, is that meant to be an elective that sort of sits between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2? Like, is Algebra 1 considered like the prerequisite
Yeah.
for that?
Yes, because we would open it up to any 10th grade student, and any of our students that are not taking honors geometry, so the students who are in the enhanced program in the middle school. So any of our regular, we'll call them CPs, it's not CP at the middle school, but the CP track. They will only have completed honors or regular Algebra 1 by the end of that point. So we would make Algebra 1 the requirement if we're going to open that up to 10th graders.
Okay, so there might be some people who are interested in who've taken Algebra 2, but it's not.
Correct.
You don't have to be at that level yet for taking that. I also wanted to ask quickly about the computer programming options, because I've thought for years that that's kind of the one hole in the program of studies, is that we didn't offer any programming or computer science. So I noticed that there are 2 computer science classes, 1 computer programming. I mean, obviously, computer programming
Yeah,
can be
we can
split
go
into different
deeper
levels.
into
It's
those,
not-
just kind of overarching topics.
Right, computer programming is not necessarily a course.
Correct.
I mean, that's a topic, and you can have
Yes.
lots of different courses in it. So, I mean, are there some thoughts about sort of how much that might expand? I don't know if we have people who are currently qualified to teach both of these topics, because programming is different from
Correct.
from computer science.
I know that the person who previously taught computer science principles retired. So we don't have anyone currently teaching it within the building. We have somebody who is supervising the VHS class. That's going to take some work, to be honest with you. I know that the district is perhaps looking at repurposing some staff that we do have. Whether or not we add somebody, I don't know if that's necessarily an option right now, given the enrollment numbers. Obviously, I would love somebody who specializes in those types of courses, but we might not be able to, feasibly do that right now. Is it a matter of, using the staff that we have in our building and giving them, the time to work on the curriculum and get familiar with it ahead of time? Work with the College Board on the AP certification, working with VHS or some other schools that have taught these courses successfully, and preparing them before the start of the next school year to do so.
Great, I'm strongly in support of this addition, and I think that we should do what it takes to make it so.
I agree.
That's it. Thank you very, very much. We appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Kim will be presenting for the Science Department.
MJ is. She was all about this. Good evening. How are you guys?
Evening.
So we have 2 proposals. One is to streamline the path that our freshmen take when they come in as 9th graders. So instead of having the 2 separate paths, physical science and biology, we would then just streamline it to everybody takes biology, and then they would continue to still apply to be in the honors bio for those students that are a little bit more mature and want a little bit more rigorous curriculum. And then the next year they would go all to chem, and then they would all take physical science or physics or any of the electives, right? The second proposal is to expand our course offerings, and we're proposing to add AP Physics 2, and then also a marine science semester course. It's very simple. Next. And then the timeline and implications. So currently, we have enough teachers that are certified in biology so that it's just a reworking of offering physical science at the sophomore level. And also, we also have people in-house that are trained and able to teach AP Physics 2. That actually started as a grass movement from students that are currently our juniors that are in AP Physics 1. And they're like, we need 2. And so I was like, all right, well, if we can get like a dozen students interested, and so there seems to be enough students. We'll see what the scheduling happens and et cetera. And then also our 2 new teachers that we've actually just got on board, their degrees are both in marine science, and they both have an interest. And we've always talked about offering more semester courses in the sciences, so this just seems like a natural option. And then we'll see what happens when scheduling plays out. Questions? I was gonna say, this is fantastic. I love it. This is amazing. It's a miracle. Yes.
It's just more of a comment. I really like the streamlining of getting all of the 9th graders, all the freshmen together into one class. I think that just makes a lot more, especially in a logistical sense.
Yes.
I think, and I like the idea of increasing the electives, especially in science, which can be so specific. And the environmental science too, I think, considering you know, our world right now, that there's some definite need for some, you know, people to have some good knowledge about that. So I'm really happy with this.
Thank you. Yeah.
So if we basically eliminate physical science,
No, we're just
Right.
shifting it.
oh, okay,
Shifting the when they take it.
okay.
So we're still encouraging all students to take physics, chem, and bio, except they just wouldn't start in physical science. Because sometimes their math skills aren't quite up to par. And so what happens is they're trying to learn a scientific concept and then solve for single variable equations, and they haven't mastered solving for single variable equations. And so they're like, oh, I know gravity exists, but I don't know how to calculate the force or the mass or anything such like that. So then if we move it up to the junior level, then it also gives them a third opportunity if they're not successful in MCAS to then also have that as a test too. So yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between the honors and the college prep biology courses as far as, you know, do they just go into more depth? Is it a matter of like the breadth of covering all the standards, or does it go into more depth? Can you describe what?
Yeah, so the honors course, I always try to tell the teachers, teach it like a pre-AP course. So many of the students that have successfully completed honors bio would then, like we have a handful, about 4 or 5 each year that then go on to AP bio. And ironically, they've been having the best track record. So every single sophomore that takes AP bio has passed and done really well. They don't have as many distractions. It's just a continuation of their learning. The CP bio course, the focus is for them to pass the MCAS, right? To have a comprehensive bio course. Honors bio would definitely go deeper. So not only would the goal is not only would they pass, but they would kind of be advanced in that.
Okay, because I'm glad, that was my next question about whether do we consider CP biology students well prepared to?
Of course, yes, it would be all aligned. Right now, last year, about 50% of our students that were freshmen took the biology MCAS. Every single one of them passed, right? And so this gives us more students, it gives us more leverage in terms of shifting everybody to attempt biology, right? And then because it doesn't have the mathematical component, sometimes it can be a lot more accessible to students that do struggle, right? Even though now the MCAS tests are all very literacy-based, like they have a ton of reading in it, so whether it's physical science, they're still reading, but then they have to read about a block that was dragged on a rough surface, and then you have to calculate the amount of friction. And after reading that whole paragraph, they're like, what am I solving for? Like, how do I draw a free-form diagram, right? Like, so it's tricky, but our goal is to get them all prepared and then also give everybody an opportunity to get to the electives by junior year.
Is there a concern that by moving everyone to, so in the current path, you know, if you're in the CP track, you take physical science, then biology as a sophomore.
And then you take CP Chem.
And, right, and so in those first 2 years, you have MCAS opportunities. Take the biology test as a freshman, or rather take the physics test as a freshman, take biology as a sophomore. Is there any concern about moving chemistry to the sophomore year, that the next viable MCAS opportunity is not until they do physics in the
Yeah,
grade?
so there is a chemistry MCAS exam. Very few kids take it. And there also is a retest opportunity in February, only offered in biology. So it actually works better in favor of our students because they take it in June, they might not succeed, but they also can take it again in February, right? Where for physical science, if they fail, they have to wait a whole nother year, and then they take it at the end of the junior year, end of their sophomore year. So this time, they have 3 opportunities to take an MCAS, actually 4, because if you count the retest in February.
The chemistry test is probably not long for the world. The Board of Education is going to be voting soon.
They haven't gotten rid of it yet, so I feel like, you know, we can only do so much. We can't predict the future. However, I have every confidence that our students will do really well on biology, given how they've done. And even in physical science, most of our students do pass.
The course offerings that you're hoping to expand, so the AP Physics 2 and the Marine Science. I know that there's sort of like this cohort of kids right now that are, chomping at the bit for the AP Physics 2. Is that unique in your experience historically, for this like particular group of kids, or have you gotten that feedback a lot over the years?
I think as more students are taking more science and AP courses earlier on, so we have more students taking AP Calc as juniors, and then they seem to want to go straight into AP Physics. So I see a more of a trend now, but in my last district, we offered 5 APs, right, and including AP Environmental, so AP Physics 1, 2, Chem, Bio. So we're on par with most of the districts, right, in terms of the number of APs. So if we added AP Environmental, that would be another AP opportunity for sophomores, right? And so I don't think it's uncommon for students that are math science students to finish with the full year of physics. I think it's doable. They have different topics, and we actually have like a core group of students that love science, which warms my heart. So my thing is, if we can run it, if we have the numbers, then why not? And then all of these are always depending on the enrollment. So we might have a big group of AP Physics, maybe we won't run it next year. It might be a course that runs every other year, so we're flexible to it. And my thing is, just have it there, and then we'll see what the students choose, right? I think it's definitely an option, considering Wilmington is very techy now with all the companies coming in and all the families that are moving in that are in the tech fields. This is logical.
Well, sort of following up on that, and not to get too far ahead, but your very last bullet here says more technology courses. I was wondering if you could maybe expand on if you've given some thought to what those technology courses might be.
So right now, I am one of the advisors to the robotics team, and it is a team. We meet ridiculous numbers of hours, and the kids always want more time. And I think if they had an opportunity to do robotics in-house, most definitely they would. But the amount of space required, the amount of money, just the time, right? And we have a core of probably a dozen students, various grade levels. So those are the things. I'm open to so much, right? It's just a matter of whether or not, we can support all the science courses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so much.
So next is our proposals for the Social Studies Department, which I'm going to present. The proposals from Social Studies start with implementing the 3rd year of the U.S. history from a global perspective. We have implemented the first 2 years, and next year will be time to implement the 3rd year. That would complete the 3rd year requirement for our social studies. We are also looking to create and incorporate a civics component project into a freshman seminar program, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. The Social Studies Department would also like to create and design a mental health, abnormal psychology as a half-year elective. They are also thinking, and I think proposing for next year, to offer some of their electives to additional grade levels. Most of our electives in the Social Studies Department are for 11th and 12th graders, and they're trying to offer them now to the 10th graders as well. So they are looking into that. So the timeline for their proposals is during this school year to collaborate to create the curriculum for the 11th grade U.S. history from a global perspective, part 3, and that will be incorporated and implemented in our program for next year. Next year, they would like to work with the freshman seminar program to incorporate a civics component into that freshman seminar, and also to develop curriculum maps for mental health and an abnormal psychology class. During the following year, they would like to implement both the freshman seminar and the mental health abnormal psychology elective. So I'll try to answer questions.
Well, of course, I'm going to ask about the mental health and abnormal psychology course. And just curious if we have staff already on board who are certified and able to do that kind of a class.
Yes, we do. Yeah. We have several staff members that would be willing to write the curriculum for this and implement the course.
Talk about what the change would be from what is currently the 11th grade curriculum to your global, the U.S. history and a global perspective 3 perspective.
I think I can, but if I don't do it well, I'll ask Mr. Staffia to answer that question and get back to you. But they've been working on a 3-year continuum of offering U.S. history from a global perspective, as opposed to 2 years of just U.S. history and then a 3rd year of world history. So they are covering more content over 3 years than they would in the 2-year program and then the 1-year world history program. I think that's the best I can do with that.
Follow up with Mr. Staffier as needed.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Brown will come up and speak about the world language proposals.
Hola.
Hola. Bonjour, bonsoir, sawe. How's everyone doing tonight?
Thank you.
Thanks. Nice to see everyone. I apologize for not being able to make the presentation round of this during December, but we were dealing with family sickness as everyone else was. So I did watch the school committee meeting, so I know that there were questions on percentages of students taking it. And I believe that Ms. Burns also asked a little bit about students with disabilities. So I can sort of try to tackle those a little bit today too. One of the biggest pieces that is still sort of the question mark is the middle school programming that's underway. There's a lot of connection in all courses with programming across English, math. I mean, we've seen it here tonight. But in the way that proficiency builds itself from one level to the next of world languages, if there are any changes in the middle school programming that affect the amount of hours in contact time or anything else like that at the middle school level, that could have effects down the road. So major proposals, I want to make sure that we wait on so that we can plan with knowing what we have as opposed to making a plan and then having to make dramatic changes afterwards. We did realize that about 2 years ago, right before COVID sort of shook us all up, that we did lack a little bit of equity on our Spanish, Italian, and French programming because Spanish was the only option that students could take coming into 9th grade. So we had planned at that time to try to add an Italian 1 course and a French 1 course so that students did have an option to shift or move around with languages. So we wanted to make sure that we had that there. Next year, we're going to offer those. Those are still going to depend on enrollment numbers, how many students sign up for it. So that's all pending staffing and all that fun stuff that comes with it. The most obvious part of the research comes with the high school graduation requirement. We noticed that we are one of 3 districts possibly in the state that did not have a world language requirement. That wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I would hope to make sure that we're okay on that. We were doing actually quite well percentage-wise compared to what other schools are also doing. We had a high success rate of keeping kids in for at least 3 years of study. I think we've ranged anywhere between 70 and 80% of students taking it for 3 years. Our steepest drop-off is the same as other districts as well, where there's a large drop-off senior year. But we were doing really well without a graduation requirement. That being said, there's a lot of room for growth with a graduation requirement, so we want to make sure that we have that component explored, well thought out in the next few rounds. easiest answer is obviously to go with sort of the Mass Core option of having a 2-year requirement. Me being the crazy person that I am sometimes, I have a lot of strange and fun ideas of how we can make a requirement that might be a little bit different, but I want to make sure that we really think through what the consequences and pathways are of that, just in case. My crazy ideas are fun, but sometimes they're a little unrealistic. And we really want to explore the realignment of middle school and high school courses that are based on just proficiency. Right now, if you look at our course catalog, it's level 1, level 2, level 3, and we've identified some course requirements that we want to make sure that students are meeting a certain proficiency level of speaking, reading, writing, and listening. But we think we can take that a little bit farther and actually make the courses that are based on the actual proficiency level. And we might be able to shake up some of those level 2 CP versus level 2 honors, where we see students who are in a college prep level maybe doing the same materials as an honors level 2 class. They're just not digging in as much or taking a lot more time to master a certain skill set. So maybe if we reorganize that just a little bit, we might be able to tap into more students' ability levels and then get rid of some of the frustration levels that students have in moving from one level to the next, because they don't have maybe an in-between intermediate mid to an intermediate, or intermediate low to an intermediate mid. So maybe if we fill in with a different course in there, we might be able to catch some more of those kids who are leaving a language because they're getting frustrated with the language. And we might be able to keep more kids engaged and involved in the language. Next slide, please. So obviously next up is the program of studies, adding those 2 level 1 classes in there and make sure the schedule works itself out. Exploring a lot of options for high school graduation requirements and all the staffing that would take place after that, and making sure that our proficiency levels match up with graduation requirements. Obviously, last year, they rolled out the brand-new world language standards. I've already tooted our horn in Wilmington, but we had 2 teachers, myself and Ms. Pietro, who were actually 2 of the co-writers of the world language frameworks for the state. I'm really proud of that. So we want to keep saying that as much as we can. Sorry. And I think it was really interesting to see that when we were looking at other programs and what they had to offer, the conversation shifted at some point during that professional development day to realizing that a lot of the things that we were offering, sometimes we were offering a lot more. And we were offering things that were much more of a modern approach than some of the other schools were. And that became really clear in reading some of the program of studies. So I think it's nice to look at other program of studies and be like, oh, we can take this from this group and that from that group. But we also realize that a lot of schools can take a lot of things from us as a district. And I thought that was a really interesting conversation and reflection as a department. And let's see. I think I can leave it right there because the other stuff is fairly self-explanatory. Any questions? ¿Algunas preguntas?
You spoke about how changes to the middle school language approach could also, of course, affect what it makes sense for, especially for our 9th grade languages to look like. Can you flesh that out a little bit with what types of changes are you thinking about, that might then lead in a different direction for the 9th grade? Like if we do what at the middle school versus what we're doing right now, how would that affect some of the ideas that you have for the 9th grade languages?
Sure. I can give an example of what some of the schedule changes that we had to make last year in order to make the schedule work with the middle school was that the middle school French, Spanish, Italian classes ended up getting grouped with unified arts classes, which met every other week, which cuts our time from 125 to 140 hours, with each grade 7 and each grade 8 down to 65 to 70 hours of contact time. So that would be the same as cutting it by a whole year's worth of instruction for 7th and 8th grade. In 6th grade, we have our exploratory program that, again, we didn't have that year because we had to make significant changes to the schedule to make the year work. But that 6th grade program is the exploratory program, which we used to not have, which students get to see a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of French, a little bit of Italian, and then make their choices in 7th grade, as opposed to making them choose in 5th grade what they would be taking in 6th grade, which is a much bigger jump of ideas, levels, and experience. So if the schedule or programming ended up looking something like that, then that affects how far maybe we can take kids at the high school level and what adjustments we would have to make there. But It's really about contact hours in the classroom and any changes to programming around that. Hopefully that answered your question.
I'm going to anticipate maybe what MJ would also ask as well. And that is related to the world language graduation requirement. And what that might look like for students who receive special ed services. So in their schedule, they may not be able to fit that in because they're receiving academic support. What would be the pathway for those students in terms of graduation requirement?
So the most straightforward path that most students have who are in substantially separate classrooms is a waiver. So there is a waiver for the graduation requirement. That's just standard paperwork that gets applied for under the same paperwork that would be through the special education process. And then that student is waived of that graduation requirement. A little bit more complex than that is really beefing up our professional development and having teachers who are, making sure that our staffing at those lower levels might be able to push students and have students be comfortable and be much more inclusive. In the new world language frameworks, there is very explicit language about making sure that world languages are inclusive to everyone. And, there's no one specific disability that stops a student from learning another language. There's lots of great case studies, and I'm sure I could sit here for the next 3 hours and rattle a few off, but I think there's a lot of options before we get to a waiver, including making sure that our professional development is where it needs to be, and getting creative with some of our graduation requirements. So again, some of the language that we can put into the world language requirement based on proficiency can be a little bit about how long you've taken the language or a little bit about, what level you've reached with the language. So I think there's some room for play in there, and that's why we want to take some time and make sure that we get the language right for the high school requirement, so.
And just one last quick thing, perhaps related, do we offer ASL?
We used to offer ASL, so I think it was in 2016 where we had a couple of program changes, all right, and then we couldn't continue that program. So we used to offer ASL as single semester courses. It was ASL 1, ASL 2, and then I think we even went to ASL 3. We had a third semester of it that was running. So, but that was about 5 years ago.
Any interest in reviving that?
I'm interested in hundreds of languages. What else would we like to add? World languages in every other department is here to serve the community, so if there's a desire from the community and the students and the population to look at languages, and we look at feasibility and budgets, then those are all fun conversations I'm always willing to have. So.
So glad to have you. Thank you.
I think Mr. Smaha was next, and then I'll.
Yeah, it's sort of the same question, just about the Italian, French, and Spanish offerings, and if you're seeing any needs or any desires from students for other languages. So I guess that's kind of the same question, but because I didn't see anything in there about perhaps exploring other languages. So the Italian, French, Spanish, all three of those have strong enrollments, I guess you would say.
They do, and I think the one problem that you run into is a world language department is really 3 language departments running under one. So I can't have, and math and English, not targeting math or English, but if you have a math or English teacher, they're a little bit more flexible in what they can teach. We happen to have one teacher that can teach all 3 languages, which gives us a lot of leeway sometimes when we run into scheduling problems. So every language that you add also thins out the other languages and the enrollment numbers. So while we love the idea of having 6, 7, 8 languages, it can be very problematic with a population size at the high school that we do have.
So for the graduation requirement, I think that you're saying that we already have a very high number of students who are taking at least 2 years of world language. And so thinking about possibly making some world language one of the requirements, is there a different type of, I don't know, are we trying to incentivize something other than what we have now, or merely formalize what's happening, but that we still would like to state as sort of a matter of what we think is important to have a Wilmington diploma, that this is something that, even though kids are already doing it, that we're making a statement that we think that this is important and should be required for graduation.
So that's one of those interesting conversations that we've had, of like, what's the main motive to have a high school graduation requirement outside of lining up with Mass Core? So one of the things we want to do is make sure that we take enough time to identify, like, what's the actual purpose of making sure that there's a high school requirement with it. We're exploring it, we're looking into it, but there's no one thing that I think has to be proven by adding a graduation requirement, but I think we need to make sure that we give it a fair shake. And honestly, above that, I don't know if the Department of Education has any benefits of being aligned with districts being aligned with Mass Core or anything like that. I don't know how that, it's 3 or 4 levels above where I operate, so. So I think we need to give it a very fair shake of what that requirement would be. Like I said, the very simple answer is a 2-year requirement like everyone else does. The more complex answer is, let's look at those proficiency levels and maybe see what those kind of shake out as, because that lines up a little bit with what we've been doing for the last 6 or 7 years. So, and that's exciting to explore, so.
Because I think that is a deeper conversation that the committee will have at a later date in terms of, well, what is the purpose of our graduation requirements and what changes to them are advancing those purposes.
I'm just curious, do we have AP in all of the languages we offer? Do we have?
So in our program of studies, we only have AP Spanish that's been offered, and even that's always been a struggle to meet the enrollment. As an example, this year we had 3 students who wanted AP, 7 or 8 who wanted honors, 6 who wanted college prep, and then we have that single semester course that runs for the Seal of Biliteracy, and those all were combined together to offer that one class as a Spanish 5 honors class all the way across. I didn't encourage the AP class. The disadvantage to having an AP class is that the AP classes can't always earn the Seal of Biliteracy, because you can't retroactively give the award after students graduate, and some of the AP scores don't come back until after graduation. So it's easier for us to administer the stamp test that we give for the Seal of Biliteracy during mid-years or any retakes that have to take place between mid-years and finals, so that those level 5 students can earn the award. And so I didn't really talk up those AP level classes because there's a lot more that can be gained from the Seal itself as opposed to the AP class. So Spanish is the only one for right now. We've also had a hard time running level 5 French and Italian courses, even though they've been in there. So those are, French ran last year as a French 5 class, and Italian has not run a French 5 class yet. We always have like 3 or 4, but never enough to run the full class. So.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
All right, thank you very much.
Very much.
Mr. Phillips will present for the business and also for the Family and Consumer Science Department.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us. I think the important thing to take away from business and family and consumer science is, in a lot of ways, it's sort of a bright spot of it to begin with. I mean, a lot of this was centered around the idea of how to make sure that we're compelling and interesting for students coming in. The business department and family and consumer science have the enviable position of already having a lot of that and not having any sort of set major requirements that are needed. No MCAS, for example. So because of that, we took some good quality time and made some pretty diagrams, which I think actually do a good job of really highlighting what we do in the business department, for example. So you can see the idea being that business principle sort of focuses everything that we do, and we certainly encourage students to take that to begin with. And you'll see that one of our proposals centers around making that more centered in how we do things. And obviously, we have a personal finance course, the Managing Your Money, which you'll see as well. Finally, an important takeaway from this particular diagram is that you'll see that DECA really is a major, very popular, very effective, very winning DECA program, and we certainly look to make that, work that into our curriculum whenever we can, and business aligns with that. Go ahead, Ms. Peters. What we're looking to do in a lot of ways, I might skip around a little bit here, some of those course name changes right in the middle there is one I'll focus on first, making that managing money personal finance. The idea being obvious. It makes it more explicit what it's for and what its purpose is. Intro to business becoming business principles. I think the idea there is to highlight its purpose as well, to say that you're going to be learning a lot about marketing, advertising, entrepreneurship, all of those things before you decide you want to go into accounting or entrepreneurship, for example. And then the idea would be to align the personal finance with the Mass Public Schools financial literacy goals and frameworks. Going back to the top now, some of the other interesting and innovative programs we're looking to bring in are Google certifications. There are a number of different options for that, as well as Microsoft certifications, Microsoft 365, productivity, etc. Additionally, if you skip down there to the fourth bullet, our idea is that Certiport is a certification organization that allows us to sort of organize nationally, internationally, our entrepreneurship program, and it will be a chance to do that. So we'd look to be certified with Certiport. And then finally, look to get an articulation agreement with Middlesex Community College, and this may be where you'd be a part of that, in order to help us gain, students who are taking the accounting program may have an option to gain Middlesex credit while they're, then they transfer those credits if they end up going to Middlesex in accounting. Thank you, Ms. Peters. Timeline for this, there's no immediate rush because, again, I think we are a bright spot in a lot of ways and have a program that is, it is very flexible. So the idea would be not this year but next year to make those course name changes and to spend some time researching and becoming certified in Google, Microsoft as examples, Certiport as well, and then looking for that, the Middlesex Community College articulation agreement. And really major costs that would be associated with that are how many licenses you'd need to purchase for any particular topic or any particular software, the cost of certifying the training the trainers, if you will, for Google, Microsoft. So those are some of the costs that you'd be associated with. So that's the business side of it. Now we'll move over to family consumer science. Here's another lovely diagram. And what you'll see is that all of the courses that we offer do a pretty good job of looking at practical, real-world skills you're going to use tonight when you go home. And we see a lot of those. My daughter's in high school in North Andover and has never taken any of these courses, and I can tell when she tries to cook that she's never taken any of these courses. So it sounds almost silly to say it, but these are valuable practical skills that everyone's going to use every day. Go ahead, Ms. Peters. So some of the proposals for family and consumer science include adding a grade 12 course related to culinary arts. The idea being that as seniors, you're going to walk out the door and focus on nutrition, focus on how to cook for yourself, how to go shopping, how to build a budget when you go shopping. These are all things that, again, as an 18-year-old, you're going to want to know when you walk out the door because mom isn't going to be doing it for you in 3 months. Looking into getting options that, similar to tech schools, serve safe certifications, family life planning, and other social development programs. Again, opportunities that are not, that you see abstractly maybe in other courses, but practically speaking, how to deal with, carrying the baby around. You guys do that when you were in high school? Yeah, one of those, something like that would be sort of a silly version of what I'm saying, but an idea of how to manage a family and how to work together with a family. And then change the name of independent living to college and career preparation. I think it's not really changing the course at all. Rather, over the years, the course has morphed, and I think this would be an opportunity to really focus on what it's about. Planning for life, planning for the day after you graduate, and what the option is there, and looking at having a career. How do I deal with insurance when I get my first job? How do I do my taxes? These are things that independent living teaches now, and that's part of what it is to be in a career and to when you move beyond high school or beyond college even as well. So that's really what we're looking at, family consumer science. Again, implications budgetarily and timeline-wise, nothing major, nothing urgent, nothing that's going to be happening before the fall of '23. Well, it'll happen when we make the course changes in the spring of '23. But the fall of '23 is when those courses will become implemented, the course name changes. And budgetarily wise, nothing specific. There will be some new curriculum around writing curriculum for the grade 12, the new grade 12 course that we would be interested in offering. And that's it for Family and Consumer Science. I thought I had another slide in there, Ms. Peters. Do you know where it ended up? Oh, did I put, oh, you have the slide, okay. Okay, well, we'll add a slide to your package later. 3 new options for courses that are related to technology as a third department in a way that I'll be presenting for. We do have technology integration, we have a technology integration specialist, and that specialist spends some time teaching courses that are related to students who will theoretically go out and provide tech support. That's not really happening. The course is morphed in a lot of different ways, so they would like some options to make some changes, including computer programming, which I think we'll be working with the math department on, some web design courses, which the business department will focus in on, and some digital literacy courses and applied digital skills, privacy, using the internet responsibly, using social media responsibly, telling, truth from fiction when you're looking at social media. These are some courses that we're proposing. Those will start, assuming that we have the numbers to run them, they would start in the fall. And we'll make sure you all get copies of that as soon as we can. Questions?
I guess it's more of, well, I guess I have one question, but it's just a couple comments. I mean, first of all, I think the level, just the Google search, the Certiport that you're talking about, perhaps ServSafe, I think as we think, we've got this budget stuff later, and we're looking at our enrollment numbers, and in all honesty, like one of the big competitions of the high school is the tech, and I think that there are probably a group of students that make that decision based on, at the end of high school, they're going to have some sort of certification that's going to help them get employed, or prepare them better for college. So I think that Wilmington High School going down this road, I think makes a lot of sense. I think the possibility of an articulation agreement with Middlesex is a fantastic idea, so kids can actually get college credit when they're in high school. I think that, all of this stuff, I think, will hopefully sway some students who might be thinking, I can only get that kind of stuff at the tech, so that's why I'm going to go there. That might make the choice to sort of stay in Wilmington. One of the questions is, has there been any thought of making, you talked about the college and career prep course, of perhaps making that sort of like the managing your money course being a graduation requirement? Has there been any thought to that?
Good question. If I can speak to your first part first, I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a consideration. The recognizing that the tech schools certainly draw students who are going to look for certifications who aren't necessarily planning on going to college. Having that employability day one after they graduate. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a consideration. Certainly it was something we talked about. And I think it's something that's important for us to consider as well. Yes, we did talk about some of the possibilities of making that a independent living type course, a college and career preparation course, a requirement. It would require a staffing change, I think, given what we already have. So yes, it's a consideration, but I think it's going to require more examination and planning to make that happen. But it's possible, certainly, and it was discussed for sure.
Okay, thank you.
So I think that some of these name changes are a good move, and make things a little clearer, which is always a good thing to know what it is that you're signing up for or looking into. Managing money sounds a little bit like you're going to be running a hedge fund,
right,
or something.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Maybe we should offer
Right.
that. That's a senior elective. So personal financial management makes better sense. On the timeline, I just want to ask a little bit about the timeline because I'm just a little confused. So for changing courses and modified descriptions, it says fall 2023, and for just that, modifying descriptions and changing course names, that seems like something that could be a fall 22.
It could. There was no reasoning behind it one way or the other, just that, like I said, there was no immediate rush. there is some consideration about how we want to approach changing the names, and obviously nothing is set in stone yet. I'd like to spend some more time exploring it before we make a decision.
Okay, because the other, I mean, obviously, if you're going to be making substantial changes like adding certifications or new courses, that's something that we want to spend next year working on, and then those, you know, those come in for 23, 24. Course change names seems, changing course names, it seemed like that would be.
If I may, there may be some slight changes to course descriptions that I think, again, like I said, we want to spend time exploring before we commit to anything and then overstep.
Thanks.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next proposal is for the Visual Arts Department. So the Visual Arts Department is looking at a possible addition of AP courses. They're looking to see next year if there's a need for it, so they are going to do some research. They're looking to add an AP two-dimensional design and an AP three-dimensional design course. They're also looking at exploring changes to the foundation level courses to include combinations of 2D and 3D foundations and a digital media foundations course. The purpose of this would be to replace our current foundational courses. We have a foundational course in ceramics and in photo and in art, and replacing those foundational courses with a digital media foundations course or the 2D, 3D foundations courses to allow students to experience different mediums before deciding which higher level art course they would like to pursue. The timeline would be during this school year to discuss the need for an AP 2D and an AP 3D design course, and to gather information of other foundational level courses in other districts. For the 22-23 school year, it would be if there is a need or there is a desire to develop the AP curriculum. They will have to do a course audit for both courses, and there is a deadline for that if they want to offer it the following year. They would like to rework the curriculum for the foundations courses and the digital media foundations courses, as well as examining current class curriculum. That would involve some PD work. And for the 23-24 school year, to submit the courses for approval and to change the course names in the program of studies.
So just quickly again on the timeline, is this idea that when we say submit courses for approval and change the program of studies, these courses and changes would be offered in the 23-24 school year? Yeah. Okay.
Just to clarify, if we replace the current foundational courses with the 2D, 3D foundations, would students still have the opportunity to do ceramics?
I believe they will have the opportunity to explore ceramics, art, and photo in 1 year to decide what they would like to pursue in the advanced courses.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Mr. Ulo will present for the performing arts.
Good evening. I do need to start out by saying thank you to Linda Peters and Christine Elliott for your guidance through this process. And Dr. Brand, good goal, because you gave us the opportunity to look at things and kind of shake things up, and this has been really exciting for us as a department. Sitting here tonight, I've been thinking about how to say this super diplomatically, but this started with the CIT Day project that quite possibly has been one of our most meaningful and purposeful assignments that we've had in a super long time. So thank you for this. We really appreciate it. As a performing arts department, we had the opportunity to look at almost 30 other schools and see what they're doing. And like world languages, we saw, wow, how lucky are we in Wilmington? We've got a lot going on that's good, that a lot of other schools wish they had. One of the things, though, that we also noticed is that we have a great platform for performance-based students, but we have very few offerings for our students who are non-performance based. And if we are going to offer a graduation requirement for fine or performing arts, we noticed that we really need to flesh out more offerings, offer more things. So our plan is to take next year and really start to delve into looking at what is possible, what can we do. And I'd like to see as a department, us have the opportunity to visit other schools, to actually see it, get out of our little trench here, which is a lovely trench, don't get me wrong, but get out into other schools and see how they're doing it and see what they're doing it. Really take some time to consider what other places are offering and how feasible it is here. And then as Mrs. Parvianen mentioned, building a whole new curriculum and writing curriculum is a heavy lift. So the next year, once we figured out what we specifically wanted to offer for both non-performing or performing, would be dedicated to actually writing that curriculum, actually fleshing that part out, presenting the new courses for the program of studies, and initiating them. I think we said 22, 23. I'm too short to see that. Yeah. Thank you. No, it's, I'm just too little. And then also, like Carla said, looking at the value of instituting a graduation requirement for fine and performing arts. So that's where we are at 24, 25.
I'll just comment that I think this is a great idea. I'm glad you were able to sort of really get excited and sort of explore some other options. I really appreciate the plethora of ideas for the non-performance based stuff, because I've been a huge fan of the performing arts in Wilmington, and you're right, a lot of it is performance based. And like, how can we sort of tap into some non-performance based music stuff? Because there's a lot of opportunities in terms of technology and all sorts of things out there that I think, there's probably some untapped talent out there in those areas. So I'm really happy to see that. One of my questions was, I don't know exactly how it could work, but has there been any thought to thinking about technology, maybe connecting with WCTV at all, in terms of any of the technical stuff you talk about, the music production or some of that? I'm not sure if that's been sort of discussed, thinking about, non-performance based.
That hasn't been discussed yet, but that's absolutely an avenue that we could definitely pursue. I do feel like giving ourselves a little time to look at this, we're kind of an academic Jenga here, because you pull out one part and everything falls down. For us, we'd be looking at the schedule that as it currently exists, and then how do we put these new electives into a schedule that kids have access to? So there's that component. Then you also have to look at currently our staffing issue, where our teachers are spread between 2 or 3 or 4 buildings. There's a lot of parts here that would have to be considered over time. But I do think something like that, partnering with something like WCTV, brilliant.
I'm just curious, on the performance ensemble-based students, is there any thought, we love when the band and the orchestra come together. Is that here anywhere where there might be an opportunity for high school band and orchestra to perform together?
So what currently exists is a band class and a string orchestra class. What you're talking about would, in most schools, just be called orchestra, where you would have a select number of wind players and a select number of string players all playing together. That certainly could be an option. I know we have honors orchestra listed, which
Yep, I
in
see
our
that.
thinking was an ensemble that would be a little more rigorous for our very serious string students. With the addition of an orchestra, we've never had that. It's each time we get to do it, it's very exciting. That would definitely be something to explore. And for our kids who look forward to being music majors, that's definitely a practical experience for their college experience.
Well, and this idea of having honors, I'm assuming that would be audition-based. They'd have to audition to sort of be a part of something like that.
Most likely, yes.
I think would be very exciting for the more serious music students. So, great. Thank you very much for your presentation. We're excited about these changes.
Mrs. Stinson will present for the Health and Physical Education Department.
Good evening, everyone. So for the Wilmington High School PE and Health Department, our proposal or objective for this particular Wilmington High School Program of Studies review, we would like to look at taking the physical education curriculum and sort of redesigning it and increasing the number of options for PE units by grade level. So for example, our health education curriculum is already 9th grade level, 10th grade, 11th and 12th. But then we'd like to take and do some more work on how we might be able to offer units for the 9th grade students so that they have maybe a couple of options of tracks potentially. Ms. Peters, if you wouldn't mind, the next, thank you. So ideally for next year, we're looking at just simply sort of reorganizing our students in the fall semester with our 9th and 10th grade students, and then looking to have our 11th and 12th grade students in the spring semester. Currently, the students are in 9th and 11th grade, and then they're 10th and 12th grade designed right now. Our courses are half-year courses, but the students participate in one semester each year. So that would be something that we would work with the guidance department and the administration for that to particularly happen next fall for the students at the high school. The high school teachers are really interested in the following school year looking at how they can design the PE course units specific for the 9th graders, specific for our 10th graders, our 11th graders, and 12th graders. Potentially looking at maybe more of sort of elective tracks where they might have an opportunity to pick like a fitness strand. They might be able to pick a sports strand where it's just the sports, where they might have an opportunity to do yoga and dance. And I know Mrs. Buckland does some bar at this point upstairs in our dance room as well. Looking at some of the potential for some lifetime sports activities. Our pickleball is a huge Wilmington extravaganza now. So I think that looking at maybe potentially looking at offering that in the PE courses at the high school level as well. So that would be our school year of planning next year, looking at some curriculum mapping and how we might be able to redesign the PE courses for our students at the high school. And that will also give us another school year, fingers crossed, next year potentially that at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, we might in fact receive an updated comprehensive health frameworks. So we don't want to jump too fast because we want to give ourselves maybe another school year to have that document before we make major changes and adjustments. And then potentially in the school year of 2024, 25, look at if there's an option, may be viable, may not be viable, whether we take our health education and sort of separate the courses. Again, this will be some exploring and assessing of what we look at here in Wilmington. And then potentially in this sounds like forever, but it goes really fast, in the school year 2025, 2026, coming before you with a whole new course of study for our students in PE and health, with a really thought out and unique design to Wilmington and to our students. I know in the past we've done some surveying of our students to see what they might like to see in their PE selections, so that might be something we bring back next year to do some really good diving into what they might be interested in. Questions? So again, I think the one critical piece for us in our department is to see if the potential for the Decile frameworks, the new comprehensive health frameworks, are released. I know they're really close, and I have a contact at Decile who's been keeping me in the loop, but it hasn't yet come to fruition. So that's why I've kind of sort of looked to slow the process to make sure that we stay aligned with the state and what their objectives are for our department.
It's not a comment. I mean, it's a comment more of a than it is a question.
Sure.
But I like a lot of these changes. I think pairing 9 and 10 makes much more sense from a social emotional perspective. I think it's probably scary to be a 9th grader paired with an 11th grader. And I also think that adding sort of more diversifying some of the current curriculum, like the PE courses, like offering yoga and dance, and really like thinking outside of the traditional kind of PE class, because fitness and exercise can look lots of different ways. So I like a lot of these proposals that you're making.
And I do believe, too, for every individual student, they have those things that they really are passionate about. And some students might be more passionate about their individual fitness, so really working with those students who might have that interest. And then there's the students that might have the interest more with the dance, the yoga, the bar, and that sort of piece. And then there's always the team sports, right? The students that love to play the team sports, whether it's your traditional soccer, football, basketball, giving them those opportunities. I know that in the past, there's been conversation, and we have had like field hockey as a particular team sport. Volleyball, we still, offer that. But I think giving the students more of a look and see, okay, this is what I'm gonna kind of have an opportunity in 9th grade, and then our 10th graders, 11th and 12th. But I do also agree, Mrs. Palmer, putting our 9th and 10th graders together in the semester, and then our 11th and 12th graders is much more advantageous for everybody as well.
Yeah, this is good.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Molly Dickerson will present the proposals from our counseling department.
All right, so some of you astutely picked up on this at the last meeting, but as part of our research, we looked at a lot of schools in this area and even just across the country and their GPA scales, and the vast majority use a 4.0 standard scale, which is also a standard of the College Board. Any college that you may attend, or any college that our students will be attending, use generally the standard 4.0 scale. So what we are proposing is changing our scale for the incoming freshmen to give us some time to make that adjustment, to give them some time to get used to it, and just to make sure we have all the pieces in place for them. And because some of our current students have already started asking about their GPA, they've already started looking at some of those questions, so we don't want to necessarily change what our students currently are experiencing in this calculation. But, so you can see, I'm looking, I guess I have it in two places. So you can see the scale that we currently have actually matches at the top. So the 4.3 and the 4.0 and the 3.7 are the same. But as you go down that scale, you can see that our scale, our B is a 3.1, where a standard scale would be a 3.0, and our C is a 2.2, where a standard scale would be a 2.0. So that's really the biggest difference, is as you go further down the scale, you can see that in two ways. It will affect our students who potentially have B or C averages, but it also means that their GPA is more accurate, and it means that as they apply to college, the information is more accurate. So I think in the long term, it is a worthwhile and useful change for us, even though some students might be surprised at the beginning to see that it's a little bit lower than what a previous class or their older sibling or somebody might have had. So that is one change. We did, so just to talk a little bit about that 4.3 at the A+ level. So some high schools have eliminated an additional point for the A+ level. Not very many. We looked at that. Only about a third of the schools that we looked at only give the same weight for an A and an A+, which is what you would usually see at the college level. You don't usually see additional weight for an A+. But we did look at our students that we have currently. There's a lot of ways to interpret this information, but our current senior class, about 25% of our students have a GPA between the 4.0 and 4.3. So if you eliminate the 4.3, you're losing that specificity for potentially a quarter of the class, which would be a major change, I think, going forward, especially if that trend continues. So for our juniors, it's a third of the class. For our sophomores, it's 45% of the class have a GPA between a 4.0 and a 4.3. So that's part of why we kept that 4.3 at the top. So the next slide is talking about the transition to weighted GPA. So there's a couple of changes I want to make clear here. So the first one is that, without making it too complicated, our current weight subtracts points as you decrease rigor. So if you can see on the left side, so AP, our current scale, that's like our standard scale, and AP A+ is a 4.3, and then we actually subtract points from students in an honors class or a college prep class for that same grade. That is unusual. I actually have not seen any high school that we looked at have a similar structure. Usually what people are doing is adding weight for students who are in an advanced coursework. So what the proposal would be is our new standard scale is there in the blue. I don't know if it doesn't really look blue there, but you might be able to see it on your screen a little better. So the college prep would be the new standard scale, and then we would be adding weight for the honors and the AP. It isn't that much different, so our current spread is a 0.6 between our AP students and our college prep students. The new scale would be a 1.0, and that's partly just to make it easier for our students and easier for colleges to interpret. And that's pretty standard. A lot of schools use that +1. I think 63% of the schools that we looked at are using that +1. So the next thing we're looking at is transitioning to a decile class rank. So we talked a little bit about this in the previous meeting. A lot of schools are moving towards either minimizing the influence of class rank. Colleges are sort of looking in that direction, but also to recognize the achievement of students at the highest level. So only about 7 schools that we looked at have eliminated rank completely. That's sort of an unusual path. It tends to be specific types of schools where everybody's kind of clogged up at the top and creates this like unhealthy level of competition, which we thankfully do not really have here. So I'm not necessarily worried in that way for our class rank, but the majority of schools seem to be moving towards this decile or a quartile. Personally, I think a decile is more useful at the college level when you're looking to compare students and their achievement. So that would be my suggestion, my department's suggestion. The proposal, when we looked at other schools, that seemed to be the most common, that you would be reporting a student in the first, second, third decile rather than saying that the student is ranked 30 out of 195. We've talked a lot about how do we maintain our recognition for our top students. The proposal tonight would be to maintain the recognition for our top 10 simple average. That's been a standard here in the district, and to also maintain the recognition for our valedictorian, salutatorian, and essayist. So that'd be rank 1, 2, and 3. So in terms of the rest of the student population, we would still want to acknowledge the achievement of those at the very top. I know that's very important to those students, it's very important to their families, but as you get further down the class, it doesn't necessarily have a meaningful difference to say that a student is ranked 10 or 15 places higher than another student. So I think that's, yeah. So the transition, we've looked at Aspen already. I talked to a couple of our Aspen gurus who have talked about this is a potential, can be in place for our freshmen. So that changed to transition to a 4.0 scale for the class of 2026. that is possible with some changes to how we have Aspen set up that we will need to look at more closely in the spring and summer. We will essentially be continuing two calculations at the same time. So our current students will be under our current scale and our current weight, and then our new incoming freshmen would be considered under our new scale and new weight. And then as we transition for the rank this spring, to talk to students about that, to get their input, to explain it. I think at the beginning, I've talked to a few of my students. In the beginning, people are like, wait, what? Like, what are you doing? Because to them, class rank is, once they know what it is, some of them get a little bit fixated on it. Some of them don't. It really doesn't affect them at all. But to be able to explain that we're still looking to acknowledge our students who may achieve at the highest level, but that as we go further down the scale for colleges, the competition they see with their peers, it really doesn't, they're not making that big of a difference between, to say somebody's in the first quartile ranked number 1, or the third quartile ranked number 1, or the third quartile ranked last. So that's kind of where there's a little more flexibility for students in their rank, and not necessarily the jockeying for like, oh my gosh, how'd I drop 2 places? Like that just isn't useful, we find, for our students to worry about that kind of small change. So hopefully we'd be able to do that this spring, and then potentially I would potentially talk about, I don't think it's on that slide, the transition to a decile rank report in the fall for our current juniors, so that when we report to colleges, that will now be our GPA report rather than our rank report rather than a specific rank for each student. And usually the way that other high schools do that is they submit a bar chart. So that's what we would likely be doing, is a chart of our GPA range, and then we would report which decile each student is in. So, so that's a lot of information. It gets a little bit, I don't know what the word is, murky because there's a lot of different ways to interpret the information and consider the data that we have, but those would be our proposals.
Thank you. I guess in theory, I like a lot of these. I like a lot of these ideas about the transitioning to the 4.0 GPA, as well as the decile class rank. I'm curious, on the timeline, it says transition to the 4.0 GPA scale, spring, summer of 22. So that would mean, looks like something just falling over there. Sorry. So that would be so that would apply just to the freshmen, or would it apply to current students? So if it were to start in the fall of 22, which is this fall, so this year's 8th graders, when they come to the 9th grade next year, it would start with them, but the students who are currently in the high school, would it impact them? Would their GPAs then be shifting, or would it only apply to that first freshman class?
Yeah, so we would make the change with the incoming freshman class and leave our current students under the old scale and the old weight. So it wouldn't. So this timeline is really talking about how do we build into Aspen so that when we run the GPA for the first time for our incoming freshmen, we have it in place. But we don't actually give our students an official GPA until the junior year, so it will give us a little bit of time to put all the pieces in place and make sure it's working correctly, but before they get to junior year, but we're hoping to have it at least built into Aspen for the fall.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess one other question about the decile class rank, is that more for students and families, or is that more for colleges? So like, when a college is looking at a student, do they only get what the high school reports to them, or do they have like bigger, powers to actually, like, if the school, if they really wanted to know where the student ranks, they could access that information, or do they only get what you give them?
So, yes, I think I understand your question. There are two, the way I'm thinking of it is maybe two different pockets of information. So the first is if a college is looking to compare a student to their peers from Wilmington High School, they only get the information that we give them. So if we report that they're 200 out of 210, that's what they have to go on. If we report that they're in the 6th decile, that's what they have. So there isn't a sort of absolute rank that they have access to beyond what we submit. In terms of how they consider our students across the board, colleges have all sorts of, some of them will recalculate even our GPA into something else, and all the other kind of things that come into play at that point of what high school you went to and what your course descriptions look like. So, but for us, whatever we submit is what the college will consider as they compare our students to their peer group here. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the 4.0 GPA transition makes complete sense. I think in the last meeting, I was saying, why were we even doing it this other way? And it's like, no one knows. It was decided before anyone has living memory of the decision. A GPA is basically an arbitrary scale, and the only thing that matters is that more or less we all agree what they are, so that we can actually use them to for an evaluation. So if most people are doing that, it makes sense for us to do it too. It's easier for everyone. For the decile, so you said that we're still going to maintain the valedictorian, salutatorian, the essayist, and I think you said that also did you say the top 10 GPA?
So we right now do the top 10 simple average. I'm right about that. Yeah.
I think we do weighted.
For underclassmen?
For what?
Underclassmen?
Oh, the underclassmen, no, I'm sorry, it is simple
Yeah.
average for underclassmen.
So we do a simple average, the top 10 students for 9th, 10th, 11th. I thought it was, is it simple for, you're saying it's not simple for seniors? So seniors would be a weighted top 10 students. So that's where, if you look at our, that proposed scale from the, yeah. So that college prep scale is what we're using, what we would consider using as our, what would be a student's unweighted GPA. So a simple average is it's like not even it's like it doesn't even, it doesn't even translate to this scale. It's just a simple average of like where they fall.
Okay. What I'm getting at though is that we have basically our top 3, which is at least for seniors, and then beyond that we have we have a sort of basically a top 10, however, whether it's weighted or simple.
Yes.
And then there's the decile rankings that we're proposing on top of that.
Yes.
So if you have a class of say 150 students, then all right, that top decile is 15 students, but then within that you have basically the top 10 that also have that recognition, and then sort of the 5 that are out, numbers 11 through 15.
Yes.
That are, that aren't. So I'm trying to just sort of think through the various, because as you were saying, sometimes you get unhealthy feelings of competition about where you are in the rank. One thing that's kind of nice about rank is that you're just kind of where you are, and you don't, the thing about slicing it up into 10 deciles is, of course, now it's like, am I in the first or in the second? There's, again, that one person, that 10th of a point of GPA that separates you from the first and the second decile. And so at the margins, at the transition points, you do get, I'm not saying we're going to have competition necessarily, but people will be kind of pretty aware of what top you need to be in the first decile or the second decile, because it's just an easy calculation to do. Just take 10% of the size of your class or 20% of the size of your class. And so you'll kind of know exactly where you fall there. And that's, I think, something worth considering as well, that's a dynamic that we don't have now.
Yes. So I think if I'm thinking through this fully, so the way that we would report it, a student who's, say they're number 1 in the second decile or last in the second decile, they wouldn't know that. So we would be reporting their rank as part of their college application documents, but they essentially would only know what decile they're in, and wouldn't know where they fall even within that decile. So they might be worried about moving into the next one, but they wouldn't necessarily know how far away they are from the next one, I guess. It would really be that top decile really would be.
Unless everyone's comparing notes and just publicly posting their GPAs.
I'm just going to actually stop us for a second. I think we probably want to come back to some of this piece, I think there's more here. We've talked sort of informally about top 10 and weighted, and I think there's actually a lot here to unpack that I think it might be helpful to come back just with this particular proposal and unpack this a bit more together, thinking not just about the 4.0 or the 4.3 or the extra point. There's so much here, but I think there's this huge mental health component that I would really love to sort of talk with Christine Murray about as well. And I do worry, and I think the students that I'm particularly concerned about are probably in that top piece, where it is this competition, if I don't take this AP, then I'm going to slip. I'm very worried about that, actually, and I think that really, they deserve for us to really think that through before we make any of these changes, where what you're saying, I'm like, that is really interesting. Like, that could be really big for a kid, right? I mean, a 15, 16-year-old. So I think we should pause on this. It's also 9 o'clock, and we have a whole budget here, a whole budget piece to get through. So I'm wondering if we could invite you back with maybe Christine Murray and Alice and just talk through some of these pieces.
Sure. The only thing I would say is just in terms of proposals for the top students is I'm not proposing any changes to what we already do. So we could, we might want to consider whether or not that's appropriate.
Yeah, right.
But there aren't any changes to that at this point.
Okay. No, I understand that.
And I have one more quick question, which is, it's not going to change how teachers do any of their grading, because all of the change is done in Aspen, right? Because they just grade on their normal
Correct.
numerical scale, which gets translated into a letter grade and a GPA, and it's just translating into a different GPA. So
Yes.
there's not going to be, because when we have that transition with some people on the old scale and some people are on the new scale, but staff are just going to be grading the way they always have.
Right, yeah, all the transitioning to points happens behind the scenes through Aspen. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Comprehensive and a lot for us to take in. Thank you.
Dr. Bryson, can I just maybe suggest, along somewhat similar lines, I'm wondering if the freshman seminar, we perhaps could, you can certainly hear it now, but that can also be, for all of this as a reminder, we're not looking for specific action tonight from the school committee. This is, as I'm sitting here, and I know it's been a long night presentation, but a lot of this will certainly cover the program of studies that will be coming before you. Perhaps there could be a focus, if you want, on the seminar that night.
I think that's fine with me, if that's okay with everybody else. Great, thank you.
The background, though, just to draw your attention to the slide pack quickly, is there's a couple of components here that will, if the program of studies was before you tonight for approval, and it does need to be very soon, as mentioned at the outset. Freshman seminar is one of those things. The GPA update and decile rank, certainly. I think that the latter two, GPA update and decile rank, certainly could be separated from the overall program of studies. The program of studies, though, is something that Ms. Peters and her administration need to move forward with to start to plan for and program for upcoming students. I think that those latter pieces could be delayed as to your point of more discussion.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Ms. Peters, thank you for this comprehensive report. We are deeply appreciative, and I actually wish this were the only thing for this evening, so spend a bit more time on it. Yeah.
I move that we take a 5-minute recess.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll second.
Everyone?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
We are here collectively. We thought I thought we would assemble here with being so disjointed. Obviously, right now with our arrangement, it seemed like a better approach, and I think more importantly, just to ensure that members of the community know that, well, it's the superintendent's recommended budget. It's a collective budget, and it really. It's here before you after a lot of hard work and collective leadership by the folks that are to my right, your left, and they are going to join tonight in the presentation. We're not here tonight to seek any action, but this is really informational. We're going to fly through some of this a little bit quicker because some of it is indeed what you've already seen before with the budget presentation in December. This is budget presentation number 2 of 3. The public hearing comes next in February, and that is when, as a committee, we'll look for your vote. So tonight, this is an outline of the presentation and the information that we'll share with you and members of our community. To start with the budget in context, we'll take just a brief moment to talk about our strategic plan and our work that we continue with. And then we'll shift into a departmental overview. These are the departments, and we'll try and take a little bit of a deeper dive in terms of some of the other departments in addition to really the primary or major ones that help drive our districts and our programs and services. We're going to take a little bit of an examination of enrollment and programmatic changes, obviously a theme that we've talked quite some time about here, and then wrap it up with an overall summary. And so I will start. Just keeping in mind, obviously there's so much in terms of context setting for any particular budget in any particular year. As we are a school system, we start with staff, and that staff builds off of the students that we are planning for. And at the present time, we are projecting enrollment of just over 2,700 students, 2,757 to be exact. Obviously, it's a projection. That can change, but these numbers generally hold fairly well with Paul having a pretty keen sense of what the carryover looks like, or the average sort of carry forward of students from one year to the next, one grade to the next. So there's a fair degree of certainty with this. Obviously, though, things can change, and sometimes they do. This budget plan forecasts 60 students educated in out-of-district placements. Obviously, that can change, but at the present time, that's what we're planning for. We obviously always plan for revenue sources that are coming to us from other sources, grants and state-funded contributions. But with all of that said, with this budget plan that's before you now, we believe that there will be the necessary funds here to support programs and services district-wide, pre-K to 12. And I think that's obviously an important piece to underscore. We believe that with this plan, we can meet all of the staffing guidelines that we have. Certainly that includes our contract commitments, and we also will plan for transportation. And I call that out because that is near to $1 million operation, so it's not insignificant in any way. Current enrollment, just the next 2 slides, take a snapshot. This is in effect data that you've seen before, so I won't pause on this long, but this is an overview of current enrollment as it stands right now. We always draw this from the October 1 enrollment that we refer to, and we use that term, and we do so because that's the certified number, if you will, that is on file with the Department of Education. The next slide provides an overview of enrollment projections. Obviously not a science here. However, and I'm losing the word, Paul, not the retention, but the phrase that you use in building this. Remind me again, I'm sorry.
It's a cohort average.
Cohort, thank you.
Based off the previous 3 years, and using essentially it's retention rate by grade, but it's a 3-year cohort average.
So what you can see here, and again, numbers that you've seen before, is that over the next handful of years, 5 years, you can see what we're forecasting. Again, obviously, this could change. The special education out of district, that's under the special or SPED line, that is out of district placements. There's less certainty with that number, certainly, going forward, but in terms of the overall enrollment through kindergarten through grade 12, you can see the numbers there that continue. We're anticipating on the gentle decline that we've experienced and talked about previously. Just want to pause here because there is a connection, there's a nexus to our budget, and that is that we continue to be mindful of the fact that while we are navigating the pandemic and all that is associated with that, we've actually, we are, and as a committee, certainly collectively are proud of the work that we've been able to do to chip away at, to tackle some of the various initiatives and action steps that were included in our strategic plan. Tonight, we're not intending to go any deeper really into that. It's something that we certainly do need to do in the near future, but you know, while navigating all that's before us, there should be pride in the fact that by our community that we are working away at a number of things that we set out to do a number of years ago. Not everything, and certainly not at the same pace, but it's there before our community, and that's really continuing to be collectively as a leadership team and across our district, shaping our work and our actions where we can around these core values and what really our central purpose has set out to become. As it relates to the budget, though, finally on the strategic plan, we do have incorporated into this budget plan for fiscal year 23, as was the case for fiscal year 22, an allocation towards supporting our continual efforts around the strategic plan. And specifically, the proposal that we are at the present time considering is really around objective number 3, cultural inclusion. The yellow font there is taken directly from our strategic plan. These are estimations, but we believe, with the exception of the first, it right now is our intention to continue with the SEAM collaborative partnership with the EDI coordinator. And in addition to that, something that we have talked about previously here, and earmarking funds for our anticipated work around an equity audit and the related work to that. So I did want to draw specific attention to that. We're going to shift now into really a 20,000-foot overview of the departments, but in building this presentation and hearing from some of the questions and comments from members of the committee in the past, we tried to give you a little bit more specific highlight of the sort of the inner workings of some of the budgets as they roll up, and some of the things that this budget in totality helps to support. So first with Christine.
So the this first slide here that you're looking at really highlights the 5 lines that fall within my budget overall for the district related to curriculum professional development. And you can see that I've done a snapshot of FY22 as well as what I'm proposing for FY23. So there is an increase ask from last year of roughly about $41,000. You'll notice that the difference between those two budgets is a little bit different. Wanted to point out that we did some movement of lines from other budget areas to, if you may recall, when I presented last year, I had said I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping and move some things that were in other places for better accounting purposes and ease of use because they felt like they should be in this budget. So roughly $26,000 worth of budget items that were already in the budget have been moved out of other areas and into this budget as well. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention at the start. So the first line that we're looking at is really the curriculum line, and what I've done is I've highlighted anything in yellow that is really new to draw your attention to it. And as in a typical year or cycle, we're reviewing curriculum, we're adding new initiatives, we're phasing other things out. Our licenses are often multi-year licenses, so sometimes we're in a renewal year for one subject, and then we have a year that's a little bit less involved, and then another year, so it's all on different cycles. So the key highlights to note here really are the things in yellow. We're looking at the language word study program for next year for grade 3, 4, and 5, so you can see those. We're purchasing intervention and assessment resources for some of these things were grant funded this year that we want to maintain going forward. Math screener and looking at just words, intervention materials, and then, as I previously mentioned, the K-5 social studies curriculum. We are in the process of piloting materials now, so that is an allocation to roll out a K-5 social studies curriculum for next year. Some of the things that are listed in white are either renewals or ongoing, but it might be a change, so a larger ticket item that I listed there as well. You can also see that I moved the ELA consumables and licenses into this section of the budget. They were in their own section prior. So those are some of the key highlights for the curriculum budget. On the next slide, we're looking at the professional development budget district-wide. So each of the elementary, middle, and high school have their own professional development line as well, but this is really for district initiatives, memberships, conferences, our professional development that is district-wide, like TLA, that we've partnered with annually for our K-5 literacy, professional development, and our mentor program stipends, and then any of the administrative contracts that have professional development for individual employees is housed in this line as well. But new to this budget this year, are building in funding for consultants for those new programs that I talked about, social studies, language word study, making sure we have the right training in place for those effective rollouts. And Salem State Collaborative License, we're a member of that district that allows us to access professional development. We have apparently been a member for years, but it was never actually in the budget, so that was a correction. And then just additional video resources for professional development and reading. And again, some of the ongoing things that you heard in the social studies proposal this evening is budgeted for here for the grade 11 social studies curriculum mapping work and professional development that they will do as part of that ongoing transition. And professional development was moved to this line for curriculum staff. And the next line is curriculum supplies and materials. Really the only new ask here is money allocated to purchase professional books for our teachers who we may run book clubs on different topics. But this typically covers supplies, orientation expenses, our Teach Point subscription for EdEval, Frontline for PD tracking, et cetera. So that's.
Can I jump in for a second, just ask, do we want to hold our questions till certain points, like after departments? I just didn't know, I don't think we had a plan for how to do this. I don't know what makes the most sense, but before we get too deep, I just thought it would be good to.
Let's finish this piece and then we'll see. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think I only have one more slide.
There's one more slide for here, and then there's a section.
And then the last two lines are on this particular slide, textbook system-wide, and then substitute salaries. So looking at the textbook line, I did not, I originally proposed a significant amount of money for each of the elementary schools to help continue to purchase literature that was essential for supporting reading and small group instruction and strategy groups and guided reading. We moved it, we kept that in the budget, but we took it out of the district-wide line here and moved it into the school-based lines so that each of the different schools could manage that a little bit better based on the specific needs. So it was more of a managerial rationale for moving it into that line, but we did add those into the budgets. And we are maintaining the classroom library budget that has existed for teachers to continue to have books added to their classroom libraries. So the increase of what I proposed is just actually in school-based budgets to be able to continue to support that. And the substitute salary line is an increase this year. We have given the universal screening, progress monitoring, we've needed to add data meetings, and we've needed to get sub-coverage to release teachers for periods of time to be able to do that. So that is budgeted as well to make sure we're covering that. So.
That is it for that department, so if you want to pause there, it's up to you.
Are you comfortable continuing, or would you like to stop? How do you want to structure this for yourselves?
I think it probably makes sense to stop with each person's presentation, just so things don't get too buried, but I think
that will also work better because it'll be hard to find our way, like once we're done with everything, the slides aren't numbered, it'll be hard to find our way back to the exact same one.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
I think maybe every department.
On
I'm happy to take questions.
We're pausing. Questions?
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, David, sorry.
So on the, so we have a renewal for the K-5 science. So that's our Elevate Science program. So I'm assuming from that we've gotten pretty good feedback now that we've implemented it fully from teachers that not that we want to jump around curriculums like every couple of years.
So so when you say we have implemented it fully, you have to remember what the last 2 years have been like. And science was not a whole lot of hands-on in the past. So I feel we need to give it its due diligence to really experience it for the a full cycle, 3-year cycle, to really get what we've used with it has been successful overall. I think we still need time, and I don't think it makes sense to make any significant change at this point in time.
Yeah, I think I meant more that we had chosen and made a decision as opposed to when we initially were testing it and piloting it, and then we had decided. But of course, I take the point that, yeah, we haven't fully implemented it in the curricular sense.
True sense, right.
And for the K-5 social studies program, so it says that that's new. Now, we haven't, I guess, had an opportunity to pilot that. How did we make the particular decision on like this program?
So we have not made
What is it going to be different that aligns in a way that we're not currently aligned with that?
So we have a lot of, I guess you could say we take a pretty eclectic approach right now with multiple different resources. So the Social Studies Committee has been researching all different programs that are available, and they're going through presentations right now with different publishing companies to look at different grade levels to look at the program and decide what we'll be piloting. Our pilots will be running probably February through the end of the school year. And we will hopefully be able to make that recommendation of what we are purchasing for the start of the next school year. But the money obviously is earmarked now, so to be able to cover those expenses. So but that's really where we are at this point in time. And when I say the new frameworks, they're not new. They were 2018, as you know, but we've done that work for the alignment at the secondary level first and worked our way back. And it was, I believe you saw last year's presentation, it had been on hold at the elementary level, given all of the work we've been doing, so I think it was delayed for a couple of years. So now we're sort of on the fast track to make some decisions about moving forward to get the resources we need in teachers' hands so that we are following the alignment with the frameworks.
Thanks. And I'm really glad to see that that new line for the professional development consultants, because with, anytime you're debuting new programs, just like, you don't want to just throw it out to the teachers, hey, here's a new curriculum, here's a new program. See how it goes. It's just like, getting good PD on that type of new programs before you implement it is so important. I'm really glad that's there.
This may actually fall under student services, but I'm wondering where money is being allocated for staff development around student safety, like mandated reporting and those kinds of trainings.
So we provide mandated reporting it's a mandatory training at the fall of every school year. We actually we did another one we'll be doing it you've done some of it, but we'll be doing it up the upcoming CIT day. So between the professional development budget district-wide and the budget in student services, we're able to cover that. However, our annual training, there's no cost involved. It's a free available training for school districts to do that online. So it's a kind of a combination of both of those.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm up. Good evening, everybody. The first slide I actually have is just an overview of, I think when typically people think of our office, they still assume special education. And so I put this slide in just for the, the public that might be watching to know that certainly special ed is the biggest budget driver, but there are a lot of other components to the office that also kind of have an impact in terms of the budget. So I thought it would be important just to kind of note those for those that maybe haven't seen previous presentations when we've talked about it. I know this is, kind of an overview of our budget, but with that, much like last year's budget cycle and some of the presentations that we've done in the fall and last spring, I think a lot of our, our work kind of looking at the budget programming in the district is centered around some of the themes that we are seeing and I think have been seeing for some time. I think the challenges, much like we talked about the last presentation, continue to be the needs for our students in the district. The pandemic has had, I think, a significant impact, as we know, on families. We continue to see that every day. I think we're seeing it in a variety of different ways. We're seeing students that are really struggling, certainly in getting back into school and their ability to kind of self-regulate, continue to make good academic progress. We're seeing it in the amount of referrals that we are receiving. We talked a little bit about that at the last presentation. They continue to climb at the moment in the district. The behavioral needs of our students, we are definitely seeing probably the most serious year that I've been here in terms of students with significant dysregulation that have created some safety concerns in our district, more than I've seen really ever before. The other interesting thing is that we've actually had a fairly high amount of students with IEPs move into the district, while I know our numbers have dropped. 20 is more than I've ever seen, probably in an entire year of students with IEPs, never mind we're only in January at this point. And some of them are coming in with sometimes out of district placements, sometimes they're coming in an in-district program, and then we have students certainly just that are requiring related services or inclusion. But, we are again in January, and we're at over 20 as of my look last Thursday. So, which is unusual for us. We don't usually have that many move-ins. And they're, students are coming for a variety of reasons, parents relocating. We've had a fair amount of students that are in foster care or being placed by agencies, so, in the community. When we look at, some of the challenges we've had, I think when we looked as a department about kind of where we were heading, there were some changes that we made, and thank God we, had access to some of the grant funding that was out there. Just to kind of review, we felt as though the mental health needs of our students was going to be the #1 challenge over the few years. We made the recommendation, and you agreed that the 2 SEL, the social emotional learning specialists for the district, were important key positions. The early childhood also was splitting a counselor. We were able to add under a grant that second counselor, so both early childhood centers have, each a full-time school counselor. We included in that grant 5 gen ed tutors, specifically they were supporting mathematics, right, RTI and math. And then we took a look at our programs, seeing the increasing numbers of some of the students in our programs. Specifically in our ABA programs, we have had kind of a significant rise. We've not only added a classroom this year, a 3rd classroom for students that have a diagnosis of autism that require specialized ABA programming at the Wildwood School, but the number of kids in it is already fairly high. And with that comes additional support for the program, as well as the strand throughout the district. Less than 10 years ago, the rates of autism were 1 in about 150. They're down to about births. They're down to about a 1 in 54. So the amount of kids aging in from early intervention with an autism diagnosis that require a lot of support is increasing every year. So what I did was kind of take our high level, there's a lot that goes into the Office of Student Support budget. I didn't include on the next couple of slides things like supplies and materials, which are kind of our lower level kind of, dollar amounts. But I did include all of the larger categories and things that perhaps you might not be clear about what it actually is utilized for, the line items. And so if you look at a few of these, we have things like legal services, so most of the legal services that have anything to do with students goes through my office. So that is not necessarily a special education line, so to speak. It's anything that has anything to do with the students. The labor portion of legal bills kind of goes somewhere else. Paul takes care of that. But anything that has to do with a student need that might require an attorney support, or guidance on would come through our office. We look at things like outside evaluations when we have to pay for outside evaluators that we either don't have in district or because of an independent educational evaluation request, which obviously we're required under the law to complete. We also do translations, so anybody that has an IEP in our office that has, that English is not their primary language or not the primary language of the home, we pay for the translations for that. Our OT services, so our occupational therapy assistants, as well as the OT and the evaluations for any OT are through an agency, and so that is one of the line items in our budget. And then we've got two somewhat similar, but try to separate them kind of in terms of behavioral health needs. That's called psych services if you look at the actual budget. But things like home services for students that receive BCBA support, if we required additional BCBA support in the district because we just might have a need that might exceed what our district BCBAs can support. Parent training, which is occasionally on students' IEPs as a result of their individual needs. And then services that are regularly provided by SEAM typically fall under that line item. And then there's more related services. So things, for example, we have Wilson tutors who provide Wilson or specialized reading supports that are not WTA teachers, that they will come in and provide support and do direct instruction with students. We have students that are in specialized programs, some out of district that require also job coaching, so that's kind of a separately billed item. Our extended school year program falls under kind of the related services line. Adaptive PE or APE, which we consult with SEAM. SEAM's provider actually does that for us. And then any other supports that we might utilize through SEAM. So SEAM has a bridge program which provides some additional supports for families and for the district around social emotional needs. Something that might not be an ongoing, or it might be something that we might need support for a program for a short period of time, or training for a program for a short period of time, typically are billed out of that line item. The next is professional development. So the professional development line for us is typically when I need someone trained in something. So for example, if I'm sending a teacher to Wilson or OG training, if we require counselors, we've been working with McLean's for a long period of time, and let's say we hire a new counselor and they require some experience in CBT to kind of get them up to speed. That would be something that we would be providing. There are some conferences that are attached to that, but for the most part, it typically ends up being either long-term kind of program support professional development or professional development that I need in order to ensure that students are receiving what they need from their IEP services, and we might have had a staff member that's changed into a new role and we just have to have them trained to do a specific program, for example. Also in our budget is transportation. So this is not our big buses, this is our special education buses through NRT for students that are in public and private day schools. So this is not our in-district buses, it's not even our in-district vans, it's the students that are bused by NRT to out-of-district programs. The last item, probably if you look at the budget, looks larger than it was the previous year. What we actually did was Mr. Ruggiero moved the tutoring lines that were in all the individual school budgets into ours because we really are the hub for that. So I ensure that the student's enrollment is accurate, give the authorization for them to receive tutoring if the student is hospitalized or in a placement, a short-term placement, and then just monitor that. This one is really our breakdown of our students that are in out-of-district placements. So if you look at the top line, public day is collaboratives. Those are considered public day schools. When you look at the overall numbers, doesn't look significantly different. I have 2 comments down the bottom. If we were to look at it just from a pure changeover in students, I would say we actually have, which is unusual, a fair amount of students that are graduating, on pace to graduate from our out-of-district programs and/or aging out. So if you were to look at it just from that point of view, I would have expected there to be a significant money drop, financial impact. We are in a place where we have a fair amount of students that are struggling, that the district has not been able to provide enough support for them to remain in the district. Their needs are exceeding what we have currently. So it's going to probably end up being about even. I know there's about a $12,000, I think, difference, but I think that's really more reflective of the students we have that are really struggling at the moment. So our proposed additions, some of these come from the Walker Report in some way or another. The Walker Report, when we had that done a couple of years ago, looked at the fidelity with which we are running eligibility meetings in the district. And one of the recommendations that they made was that we add a team chairperson, which we did. It still was probably close to not being able to, even if we take the pandemic kind of out of it for 1 second, not being able to have 5 team chair people running all of the out-of-district meetings and 8 schools worth of students, initial and reevaluation meetings. So what continues to happen, while there's less of them, there are still some other people that run meetings. For example, special education teachers, school psychologists. Adding this, then you factor in how much of an increase we've seen in terms of the amount of evaluations that we're doing, not only just from the initial evaluations that we're being requested to do, but the complexity with the students that we have that are currently on IEPs. I would say with the exception of a very small handful of kids, maybe you have a meeting or 2 a year on a student. I would say most of our students at this point, whether because of things that they're struggling with inside or outside of school, are reconvening the teams 4 or 5 times at this point in the year. So that puts a draw on everybody that runs the meeting, everybody that attends the meeting, and creates just a capacity issue in terms of the team chair. So as to want to be able to get closer to being able to have one facilitator or trained facilitators running eligibility meetings, we would really need to be adding another team chair. The second is also came from the Walker Report, which was the addition of the special education at the inclusion model in the middle school. This would kind of take care of we added a position, it's either 2 or 3 years ago now. I think it's 2. Yeah. And then this would be the second one that their recommendation was to add. And I think with everything that's happened in the last couple of years, we just kind of paused on that. This would ensure that all of our students are receiving all of their instruction in the inclusion model from a certified special education teacher. The third, one of the other recommendations they made was to look at the consistency of our clinical supports, particularly at the elementary level. So for example, prior to this year, there was a school psychologist at the Woburn Street, but the exact same school at the other side of town had a full-time school counselor and then a school psychologist who also supported the building. And while, they have excellent clinical skills, the responsibilities of a school psychologist requires them to attend many of these meetings that we're talking about, as well as a good chunk of their work is actually guided around testing. So it takes away from their ability in a 1 through 3 school to be able to provide the exact same level of support at the Woburn Street that you would be able to, provide at the Shawsheen. So by adding the school counselor at the Woburn Street, that would be able to, create some consistency. And then you have the person that's in the school psych position potentially doing testing and support in a different way in the district. So it would essentially create consistency in all of the elementary schools. Two school counselors at the Boutwell and Wildwood, 1 in each. 2 school counselors at the Woburn and Shawsheen, and then there's 2 school psychologists at the North and West, 1 each. Any questions?
The proposed addition of the special ed teacher at the middle school.
Yep.
Is that for a specific program, or?
It would be an inclusion position.
Okay,
Yep.
so if I'm sort of imagining this correctly, it's almost like a co-taught model, so this special ed teacher would push into a gen ed classroom and support.
And have a learning center as well.
Okay.
Typically on their schedule. So right now, let's say, for example, I'm gonna have the wrong grade level, so don't quote me on the grade level. But, for example, in 6th grade, there's 2 special education teachers, 3 houses, right? And 1 educational assistant. And so they're flip-flopping between the educational assistant and the special education teacher providing those services to those students. So this would replace, essentially, an educational assistant and the inclusion model to be a full-time special education teacher.
Can I follow up on that topic of educational assistants? I'm just curious as to the level of professional development that we currently build in for our ed assistants.
Yep.
Because I do see them as, so like now, they're filling this crucial role,
Yep.
essentially, of really supporting our highest needs students in the inclusion setting, which is really where we ideally want them to be. But I am just curious as to how much time and therefore money are we devoting to their professional development as well?
So I would say it depends on kind of the program and the focus for the year, what we have done with our educational assistants. We typically do an overview training with all, the other challenge we have as a district is me being able to take every educational assistant from every building at any given time. So if I were to take them on a CIT day, I have an hour and 40 minutes from the time that the last person is able to leave their building and get to a location, or even via Zoom, maybe it's a little bit longer. And then the first group of people leave for the day, right? And just in terms of a time. So that has always been, whether it's educational assistants or providing support to the special education teachers, has always been one of my challenges. In terms of providing PD. But generally, we do, at the beginning of the school year, we do kind of the overview about kind of clarity in roles around kind of what the role is. There's a variety of educational assistant positions, so that is fairly generic. They, educational assistants in the STRIDES program receive training in the ACE curriculum, as well as de-escalation strategies from our BCBAs. I've also brought in SEAM to do that, to help them with the behavior management piece. The educational assistants typically attached to the social emotional programs also participate, although it is a scaled back version just because we can't pull everybody at one time in some of the McLean CBT training. I would say that the group that we have not targeted as much is the inclusion educational assistants, because they are less in terms of a group and difficult to pull. So for example, I might pull, there would be 3 from the middle school or 4 from the high school. And so that is definitely an area of need in terms of the inclusion piece. Most of our PD for our educational assistants have been around our specialized populations for students over the years. And so in terms of money, I would say it varies from year to year. I could go back and take a look in terms of how much we've spent on them, but we've done things from SEAM. I've had McLean's come out. We've done our own internal, where our BCBAs actually do a lot of the training with our educational assistants. Typically do those in smaller groups and program specific. But the challenge for me has always been our structure for PD. It's very difficult. You know, we would do things in person. Some of the elementary programs could get there at 12:40, and the middle school's leaving at 2:40 if you tack on that extra hour. It's hard to create momentum.
I just have a, sort of on that same note, but, so they're being pulled for PD. I'm actually more interested in knowing whether or not they're getting coaching. Like, do we have a model of sort of, like we would for teacher evaluation, where there's a way to sort of provide in-the-moment coaching might be more effective than trying to pull them all in these little bits to do that sort of work. And I don't know if there's money in the budget for something like that, or maybe we just need to rethink how we're providing support for our paraprofessionals. I mean, I think there are some districts or some schools that work with universities to sort of prepare paraprofessionals they can also get their degree, their master's at the same time in special education while they're doing it. I wonder, I mean, we just have so very many of them, and some of them, I believe, are probably certified teachers, I would imagine,
Yeah,
right?
we do have
And then some probably aren't, and
Yep.
so, I mean, are we providing a place for them to really grow professionally? Are we seeing that in the budget, which of course we know then really impacts our students with disabilities? So I think it's just something for us to think about. I understand the scheduling difficulty, but I feel like at this point, we need to sort of like, okay,
Yep.
so what's next? And I think we're gonna support whatever you bring to us that says like, hey, this isn't working, but this is the kind of support we know our paraprofessionals need, so.
Oh, great, okay.
David?
So as you mentioned at the Shawshene and Woburn Street, that the school psychologists have, a lot of responsibilities with evaluation and so forth. So with them at the west and the north, are they able, because of the size of the school, since we're only dealing with 2 grades, are they able to take on some counseling? How do we meet the counseling needs of the west and the north without a dedicated school counselor?
So if we look at the Beltwell side of town, for example, right, we have got a school counselor at the Woburn Street, school psychologist at the west. But we also then have a school psychologist who actually travels, so services the Beltwell, services the Shawshene, and then also takes some of the caseload from the west school psychologist to help out. So they do all the counseling, they do all the classroom lessons, a lot of the preventative work. I think they have one smaller grade level, and then having that school psychologist that's been able to kind of support that person in that role when evaluations are just too much, has been manageable. I would say that this year, last year, it's been stressful with just the volume of evaluations. So we have also been down a couple of school psychologist positions this year, which has not helped, but people are pitching way in and helping anybody to ensure that kids' services continue regardless. So I would say prior to the last couple of years, I would not have had any hesitation in saying that's fine. Right now, if we created the same model on the other side of town, then we have somebody that can do the same thing on the other side of town.
I just had a question, and it's more about SEAM.
Yeah.
And so the district pays one, like, set fee to be part of SEAM, and then there's like additional, almost like add-ons.
Yep.
And so that's where this stuff comes in. So like some of the psychological services or the SPED-related services,
Yep.
those are like add-ons.
So we pay SEAM on an individual tuition basis if a student goes to SEAM for a program. If they're providing home training or BCBA support to a family, then we get billed hourly. Yeah. If I pull them in to help us with a program, we'll get billed hourly as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good evening, everyone. So on our first slide, or my first slide, I should say, these are the 7 line items that make up the Office of Information Technology budget, the largest of which is the instructional technology line item. That covers all of our subscription services throughout the district. There have been several specific software titles that we have that have had significant price increases. I think they're kind of taking advantage now that we're using all this software after COVID. They're jacking the prices up. So we have had to raise that line item to cover that, and we are actually engaging in a more in-depth study of how we're using each one and making sure that our licenses are exactly what we need and working through that process. Next few line items have not changed since FY22. Maintenance and repairs has gone up slightly to cover card swipe supplies. We're going through swipe cards like there's no tomorrow with all the staffing changes, having to print badges. Safety and communications went up about $10,000 to cover pushing out the Raptor visitor management system to all the schools. About half of that will be ongoing costs. The other half is just implementation with new hardware that they'll need, the scanners and so forth. On the next slide, the largest portion of our budget is capital requests. So in FY23, we have several projects that are going forward to town meeting for approval. one of which is to complete the multi-year project to replace the projectors at the elementary schools that are up for replacement. Primarily, this will be at the Woburn Street School. Also replacing the wireless access points throughout the elementary schools. That number is also 40% of that cost is covered by E-rate program, so that's not the total cost. The elementary switch program that will replace all the network switches and infrastructure throughout the, everywhere but the high school, middle school. The middle school was in last year's capital budget. That is also 40% of that cost is covered by E-rate. Starting the project to replace high school projectors, most notably the auditorium projector and classroom projectors in the first year. And we'll do the rest of the projectors in the classrooms in the next year, and the year after that we do the projector in here and in the library. Lastly, we have some money set aside to do some PA upgrades. These are the intercom systems in the school, primarily the Butler and the Wildwood. We're looking at some wireless systems for those schools. The ones they have now are just failing, they're too old. We're having a lot of trouble getting parts. I do want to point out that FY24 has a significantly large number of projects, so that'll be a challenge next year in next year's budget. Last slide I have.
If I may, just quickly, is when we presented in December, we mentioned that we'd be meeting with the town manager and his staff, and we did do that on December 17th. And one of the requests was if we could reduce our FY23 capital by essentially $46,000. So Mr. Lord, what he did is the PA system upgrade, that $24,000, we had moved 46, that was 70, we moved 46 of that to FY24 based on a request from the town manager and his staff.
And the last slide is the library budgets, which also fall under the OIT. We do have a significant need to improve our library collections, so I worked with Heather Peachy, and she in turn the librarians, to come up with a proposal to increase our funding significantly in FY23. And what that equates to is roughly, we took the average cost of a new book, which was, they looked at some publishing companies and some services to determine that is, and we did $17 per student at the elementary schools to solely just beef up the library collections. There are numerous needs that are driving the need to upgrade our collections in the libraries, and that's what that figure represents. I think that's it.
Questions or comments? Sorry, Mr. Rexton.
Can you, under the instructional technology line, can you give some examples of what some of the big drivers of the increased costs were for that?
So, product like Class Kick went up $4,500. IXL went up $5,200. Vocabulary went up $3,000. Nearpod went up $1,000. There was also a Gizmos license that was under a grant that's now in our operating budget. We did add a new iPad management system so we can control the iPads and remotely push apps out, mostly for special education students. We've added a SysCloud Google backup system to back up our Google Drives, but those are some of the examples of price increases that have gone up in those.
Mr. Fennelly?
So, I understand Mr. Ruggiero's point about moving a little bit of the money in the capital budget, but could you explain, I'm sure we've talked about this in the past, and I'm just misplacing the information, but I'm looking at the capital budget for the next 5 years, and it's a low of, essentially $250,000 to a high of $750,000. And I'm just wondering why such a big discrepancy between the years. Is it licenses that are expiring, or things are happening, or just talk me through the process?
Yeah, age of equipment really that drives it. So like the VoIP system is a $250,000 of that is a VoIP system. The VoIP system itself is a software-based Skype for Business system, and Microsoft is dropping support for it in the year after that. So that's like, gotta do it that year.
Gotta get it done.
And that's a big chunk of money for that particular product.
Sure.
High school projectors, that's a project that was a little further out. We pulled back because they're failing at an extraordinary rate for us. So we're having a lot of problems with projectors. We've got in this building alone, I think, we're trying to order projectors already. We can't even get them. So Network equipment, wireless, those are all 10 years old at this point. The building, opened up, 2015, or 2014. So it's really just the age of equipment that drives those, that equipment. So.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I'm sorry, no, I have one too, go ahead, Melissa.
Go, Jen.
No, well, I'm just, the books, the texts, where, I'm looking at the detailed recommended budget, and so I see large percentage increases in the school budget, in the particular, is that what you're referencing as well?
Those
Okay.
line items are managed by by my office.
Okay,
Yeah, but they're actually in the schools separately, so.
okay. And those were very large percentage increases?
Yep. In the past, they only had maybe $1,000 or dollars per buy books, so it really was not sufficient to maintain their collection. So they've fallen behind over the years, and a number of increases in need that pushed us to really fall behind in our library collections and need to push them to get to where they should be in one big chunk, basically.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful, because I was curious about that, so now I'm trying to
Yeah.
pull it all together. Mrs. Plowman?
So something that I keep thinking about under the category of capital requests is obviously this other looming, big thing we have going on in the district with the rebuilding of the Wildwood and the potential for consolidation of buildings, and that has to be a tricky thing as you're kind of figuring, are we gonna, put money into some of these capital requests in these buildings, and then what's going to happen, potentially in 5 or 6 years from now. And so I don't really know what my question is, except how are you doing that? Like, how are you navigating that and sort of picking and choosing? And I'm assuming you're obviously being really cognizant of that.
So almost everything, well, everything, I shouldn't say almost, everything in this year and next year's capital budget are at the point where they're failing now.
Yeah.
We can't wait the 5 years
yep.
for that to happen. So over my career, I've been involved in 6 building projects, and it's always that same question is, doing that. So as you get closer and closer to planning that building project, once they kind of decide what the scope of it is, you'll start to alter your capital plans to try to take advantage of things that maybe you're going to replace projectors at the school that's going to be replaced 2 or 3 years before the building's replaced, with a plan to take those and move those to another school and the building closes, and then you're foregoing that project.
Mm-hmm.
So, we use things until they're absolutely have no use out of them whatsoever. So anything we'd put in a school like the intercom system.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at a wireless system for the Wildwood School, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
That system is completely portable, completely wireless, and can be moved and used in any kind of a situation that we want. So that's a very easy thing for us to install, much lower cost than rewiring the building or something like that, and also potentially usable if we had to, have some temporary facilities or portable facilities easily moved to another school. So you try to make those decisions as best you can, and try to play the game of where it's going to end and if it's going to come. So.
And that's why we're glad you're here. Thank you.
Sorry, I just have one more. I'm at this library piece. When the principals are making this request, this is coming from, I'm assuming, classroom teachers. Is the literacy coach involved in this work? Can you just walk me through how these? For the library,
Right,
yeah, so
so-
any of that, who's overseeing, I know it comes out of but who's overseeing that process,
So
I
Heather
guess?
Peachy is our head librarian, so she was the one that really helped develop this budget request, and she evaluates the collections with the building-based libraries to determine what the status of their libraries are. So when they're looking at their libraries, they're working hand in hand with the curriculum people for what their projects are, what their needs are, what the science curriculum is, and try to make sure that the library collection meets those needs. So the reason really we pull it together as far as under OIT is to try to centralize it under one spot, so it's not in one school doing something different than another school, and try to unify it across the district.
Understood. But Reader's Workshop, Writer's Workshop, that would be individual books for classroom libraries. Is that not what I'm understanding? So is
There's
this?
separate line items in
Yes.
Christine's budget for
Yeah.
the classroom libraries as well as.
So I think what they're looking at is to get additional texts that
Okay, 'cause I'm-
support the same themes and same ideas, and just to upgrade what they have. So the teachers have the mentor text in their classrooms, but this is to bring the school-wide libraries up to par, to in line with what the needs are based on our current curriculum.
Okay, so when I'm looking at this budget, when I'm seeing those high increase, some of it may be the school library, and some of it may be the classroom libraries.
So this is the school library.
This
what you're
is the school
seeing.
library, but I mean, if I'm looking at, say, Shawshene,
There was an increase in, so the classroom textbook line is what covers the classroom libraries. And so that is still in existence. And then we added additional funding at the principal's discretion, but it was really earmarked towards the fact that the book rooms in each of those schools, K to 5, to support classroom instruction and reading, small group instruction strategy, were really depleted in a lot of areas. So we added money there to add additional text to those libraries as well.
Okay.
So school-based libraries.
I don't want to, I'm not trying to micromanage. What I'm trying to understand is when we then hear from teachers that they don't have what they need, and I'm sitting here going, oh, that's so weird because we increased it by this much percent. How does that not? So I guess are teachers feeling that, or is it more sort of centralized where principals are telling you what they think they might need? Like, I'm just making sure teachers are getting
So like
what
the
they're
selection-
promised.
So like the figure we came up with was, an average one book, essentially one book for each new student. The selection of those books is done by the school librarian, the head librarian, in consultation with the grade level teams and, looking at their curriculum. So they
Sure.
pick the books and exactly get them what they need in the library as well as and then the money in the budget for the classroom libraries is more selected specifically by the teacher. So.
And in addition to that, I would tell you that I have been meeting with every elementary teacher multiple times already this year through our data meetings, and those are the conversations we're having around what resources they have to be able to provide intervention. So we've identified those gaps
Perfect.
together.
Great, thanks. I'll just say we've come a long way in that area, so I appreciate it. Thank you for that clarification.
So the next section, there is a handful of slides here that certainly we can take some time to go through, but in the interest of time, recognizing that it's late, we certainly can, I think, I'd suggest go through these quickly, but we provided these based upon some of the inquiry previously from members of the committee around trying to have a better understanding of what sort of shapes the other departments other than the major ones that you've heard from tonight. So we can walk through these if you want, but they're here certainly as part of this presentation. This will be made available to the community, but as you can see here, I just gave you a snapshot of the Performing Arts Department and some of those respective lines that piece together as a whole. Some context for performing arts, visual arts is followed here, ESL, or English as a Second Language, physical and health education was the final section. So again, just sort of in the interest of time, I don't mean to brush over those and suggest they're any less important, but if there are questions, of course, we can certainly take those.
If I could just add, the request was to look at some of these these funds for the most part are within the central office. Whatever was requested by these groups were actually in the budget. They're in the recommended budget. We didn't do any cutting. We might have moved some funds from their budget to a conference budget on the professional development on Miss Elliott and so forth, but we haven't cut anything from what they had, these groups had requested, so it just gives you an idea.
No, thank you.
This is their actual request.
Great, thank you. Any questions on those slides? David?
Really quickly, so for the pre-K music class, can you talk a little bit about how that sort of just came about and was proposed, where it was?
I can try it, and someone that's much more versed than this can do it. So Ms. DeLulio had made this request at no additional cost, and her thought was to bring music class down to the pre-K level. There's a benefit to that. I think we're from K up, but she wanted to bring it down to pre-K. She could use her current staffing to handle this. And I think in here, it talks about how much time per week. There's a lot of words on here.
Well, I'm just.
I think it was like 1 day per week.
I believe it was 1 day per week.
I'm just thinking,
Day per week. And this is in here, this is a request, there's no cost. I mean, the issue here will be scheduling, so the superintendent, Ms. Elliott, and the Early Childhood Center principals will have to kind of work together with Mr. Lilio too to make sure that this can be scheduled in. So this was just something that she thought would be a benefit to the students to bring it down to the pre-K level.
Also glad to see kiln maintenance in the visual arts budget. Don't want your kiln exploding. Glad we're keeping that on.
Any other questions about those slides? Just looking at physical education, Gopher, what is that? Am I supposed to know
That's
what
a
that is?
vendor's name. That's the actual submission. That's a vendor's name. So
Okay.
that's really
Great.
means nothing other than
Supplies.
that. That's the vendor that she uses.
It is, we have two last sections to go, and they're not any less important, in my opinion. Well, certainly this one is sort of framing the budget conversation, and again, I don't mean to brush over it, but acknowledging the hour. But what we really thought was important to, because this is as budgetary as anything else within the conversations that we've been having, is the fact to draw attention to a couple of important things that really, many of which have been touched upon throughout the budget presentations to this point in time. But I do think it's important as we consider this next budget presentation or budget plan for FY23, to keep a couple of important things in mind. And that was the thinking behind the inclusion of the content that follows in these next few slides. There is no question, as we talked about previously, that we as a school district are experiencing a decline in enrollment. We've talked about that at some length. We don't need to, I don't think, push any further into that right now. Are we following other communities throughout the Commonwealth? By all accounts, absolutely. The Commonwealth as a whole, prior to the pandemic, was experiencing a decline in students for whatever reasons, a variety of which I think holds true. We also know that in this community we are seeing a fairly significant exodus of students from the 8th grade to the 9th grade, of which we've obviously also talked about, and just to take the opportunity to highlight what we're trying to do to better understand that and to take into account that reality. I do think, though, that in the broader context of thinking about budget, thinking about staffing, thinking about student enrollment, there are some really important things for our community to keep in mind. First and foremost, and this held true prior to the pandemic, the complexity of student needs is ever-changing, not just in Wilmington, but everywhere. And I think sometimes we probably don't necessarily, we do spend a lot of time talking about that through different angles and different inroads, but I think that that's really critical to underscore and to keep in mind. The other thing that we also, I think, as a community need to keep in mind is that we have taken steps to try to educate as many students as we can in district. And when those two things sort of come together or collide, you do understandably come to terms with an overall picture that may not quite add up, so to speak. And by that, I mean there's a drop in enrollment. Why isn't there a drop in staffing? And this is, I know this is short order here to try and address a pretty big topic and touch upon this, but this slide here gives a sense of over the last, approximately decade, some of the fluctuations and changes in staffing. Obviously, as a school system, staffing makes up the largest component of our budget. It always has, it always will. To suggest for those in the community who have drawn attention to that, I do think it's important to point out that our overall general education staffing has in fact declined fairly significantly over the last, I'll say, the decade. But you can see correspondingly that there have been increases, and some significant ones, in special education, educational assistants, guidance psychologists, and social workers. And I think that those specifically, those three, are tied into those earlier 2 points that I think are really critical to keep in mind as we go about thinking about, going forward, thinking about budgets for the Wilmington Public Schools. Do you want to
Sure.
take these?
Yeah.
These next, 3 more slides here.
So I think when we talk about out-of-district programs, obviously there's a cost benefit to having in-district programs. But I think what's more important is the benefit that it has to kids. So I can tell you just kind of from my own personal professional experience, that kids that are educated in the least restrictive environment, meaning with typical peers in their home communities, we know anecdotally, but we certainly know it from a data point of view, the largest research study being Thomas Hare's 2012 Special Ed Outcomes Report, that those kids longer term have better outcomes in life, whether it's graduating from high school, having access to college, less involvement with the criminal justice system. And so while there's a benefit for us as a community, certainly from a budgetary point of view to have these programs, the bigger benefit is who we are turning out as citizens. So I think it's important that we remember that when we look at these, instead of, sometimes it's easy to just kind of think money and programs. So we have really made a concerted effort, I feel like, in this district, at least since I've been here, to develop programs and high-quality programs to try to educate as many kids as we possibly can here in the district. Going back to even August of 2016, we'd redesigned that program up through even August of this year, where we added another classroom at the Wildwood School for our students that have autism that require ABA services in a programmatic environment. And so I think, as Dr. Brand was saying, there is an impact in terms of staffing, both special education teachers, but also educational assistants to effectively support those programs. And the balance is sometimes different from year to year in terms of what staffing might be required in a specific program. When you look at the numbers going back as far as I could go, the dark blue is when we started adding programs, so the 2016 forward. And there is an impact on the amount of kids that we were able to be retaining in district. It's not a pure one-to-one correspondence. We certainly have other factors that can contribute, moves in, moves outs to the numbers. But there's definitely been an impact in terms of our ability to manage students. I think it's very interesting when you look at 1920 forward, we're starting to see a creep up a bit. And I would say that corresponds with everything we're seeing in the district in terms of student needs. So I think the commitment for these programs has a bigger benefit to us than just money. We did this slide a couple of years ago, for those of you that might remember. It was broken up by elementary, middle school, and high school, but it looked at the cost comparison of those programs that we created since 2016 and what the cost benefit was for us as a district. Now remember that most students, if they go out of district, are not out of district for a year. They are typically minimally out of district for at least an IEP cycle, which is 3 years, so that's why the choosing of the estimated cost over 3 years. We currently have 187 students that are serviced in our programs. That does not mean that they are all sub-separate students. They are somehow receiving services through one of our programs. So for example, we could have a student that started as a sub-separate student in a program and is now a partial inclusion student attached to that program. But these students are receiving specially designed programming inside a program, whether it's language-based, our STRIDES programs for students with autism, life skills programming at the high school, the post-grad programming at the high school. And while not all of them would be out of district, if we were to look at that, the impact would be significant. Our estimated one-year cost, if we didn't have the programs, would be, over $2 million. In district cost us about $2 million. If they were out, it would be about 13. If you look at that, what that would cost, not factoring in your 3 to 6% increase for the programs, just kind of using pure numbers, it would be $40 million over the course of 3 years. So while not all these students would go out of districts potentially if we didn't have these programs, a good chunk of them would. But you can see the significant difference between what it costs to educate students inside the district versus what it would cost between transportation and tuitions out.
Yep. As I mentioned, we met with the town manager and his staff at the end of December, and his request to us is, if you remember, our preliminary budget was a 3.09% increase, and he asked if we could get to a 2.5% increase. So we had, it was a very productive discussion with the town manager and so forth. So we worked to that number. Everyone up here in the table worked together to come up with that. So what you have here are the FTEs. So we started, the FY22 budget had 487.9 FTEs. As I mentioned the last presentation, we had 2.2 FTE increase before the start of the school year for various reasons. And we have a 0.65 reduction during this budget to bring our FTEs to 489.45. And the big changes here were we did include 2 FTE reductions, a 1.0 FTE reduction at the middle school and 1 at the high school. Those were our changes from the FTE standpoint compared to our the superintendent's preliminary budget. Next slide. So this next slide just shows the salary. We're going from 35.4 million to 36.4 million. In order to get to the 2.5% increase, we reduced out of the total budget from the preliminary to the recommended $260,000 to $263,000. Most of it was within the salary area. And really, other than the 2 FTE reduction that I just mentioned, we recognized some savings from some retirements that came in late that we couldn't get them into the preliminary budget. So there's some retirement savings that we anticipate people we hire at a lower salary than people retiring. We had some replacements. There was some savings for replacements of open positions that we had in the preliminary budget that got filled between then and now, and the 2 reductions. So the accumulation of all that was about $262,000 savings on the budget. So the salary budget's 2.68%. On the non-salary, we really, there's no change in the total FY23 budgeted non-salary, $9,552,770. Although what we did do is we moved some money around. We reduced some maintenance and repairs, a little bit of some costs in the high school and some costs in the middle school, and we added a potential special ed tuition into the recommended budget. The net of all that non-salary change was 0, but we just thought that we changes that made sense and so forth. And here you have the recommended budget, a salary increase of $951,099 or 2.68% compared to FY22 budget. In non-salary, $169,278 or 1.80, and a total FY23 budget of $45,935,465 or a 2.5% increase over the FY22 budget. And I think collectively we thought we could support this, and everything that we just presented shows that it's all within the recommended budget. And I think we're pretty confident that this supports what we're trying to do for FY23.
So the next steps in the budget process, there are a few more to come, but as mentioned earlier, the public budget hearing of the school committee right now is scheduled for February 16th. Presentation to the Wilmington Finance Committee is upcoming on March 1st. We have a scheduled date along with the other departments in town. That is the general approach that's taken for us to deliver that. And then, of course, town meeting currently scheduled on April the 30th, which will bring to a close this budget process. So I know this was an extensive presentation. Once we get through this, we're trying to find the right balance to present information to you and to the community that's helpful. There's an awful lot, as you know, that goes into school budgets. And as we get through this, certainly your feedback on from the presentation standpoint, what's helpful what might be too much, what's maybe lacking certainly is something that I'd love to talk more about. I know that's not tonight, but with that, happy to take any final questions if you have any.
Thank you. Questions, comments, Mr. Samaha?
I'll say, overall, thank you all so much. This is an incredible amount of work, and I really appreciate it, thinking about all of the different initiatives and all the things that we want to get done to keep our district moving forward between, sort of balancing all of these different things, the wants and the needs, the contractual obligations, the legal obligations. I just think it's amazing that you guys are able to pull all of this together. I sort of took a look back at, what the overall budget increases over the years, or the past 3 years. So I looked at last year, it was a 2.5% increase, which is the same as this year. The year before that, it was 4.25%. So I think, I think you all are to be, applauded for, trying to keep it within, within what, what the town wants, but able to meet all of the needs that I sort of spoke about. One of the slides that I thought that was really, extraordinarily helpful is one of the slides, and then sort of the special education follow-up, where it talked about the decrease in general education teachers, because we're sort of looking at this, and I think that really sort of solidifies it, and I hope that it's a really good frame for people to think about, is if we have decreasing students, why do we have increasing budgets? Why do we have an increase in staff, for example? That doesn't make sense. But when you really look at it broadly, and you think about increasing special education needs, increasing mental health needs, that's where we're seeing it. We're actually seeing a decrease in gen ed and the increases in those other areas. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. So thank you so much.
Other questions or comments? No. You wore us all down. I mean, I'll echo Jay's comments. I don't have anything else to add to that. I think you said what many of us were thinking. We're deeply grateful for the story that you tell. I think certainly in the years I've served in this committee, we've come a long way in more deeply understanding what goes into this budget. And so I feel like a much more, I don't know, say competent member or something, where I'm like, oh, I understand this now, like, as opposed to, I just remember used to circle like percentage increases and not really know why. And I still do that. I still go through and highlight where I see these large, and ask those sorts of questions. But I do feel like I have a much stronger understanding of the budget story of our district and where we've started and how far we've come, and I feel like I can stand behind that. So I appreciate the time. I will put in that next year this will be the only item on the agenda, which I think I did say. I'm just going to say it for the record. I think I did say that a few weeks ago. I don't know how I got bamboozled, but anyway, we do appreciate your thought and the specificity of this, so thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. January 24th is not on this list, but that is the town manager's budget presentation, and we will have representation there, so. January 24th. Yeah, so I think people may have let Tracy know already. Did they let you know if they were coming? No? Not necessarily? Okay. Okay. So we should probably,
I can be there.
Dr. Brand, we should let Tracy know who's coming to that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, that would be great.
We'll do that.
Thank you.
February 16th is the regular session meeting and the school committee budget hearing here at 7:05. We do start that right at 7:05. That's
Yes.
we have to do it that way. I've learned that. March 1st, school budget presentation to Finance Committee. March 8th, special town meeting, Wildwood MSBA vote at the Shriners Auditorium. And then March 9th is our regular session meeting here again at 7 o'clock. And I'm going to skip over the other things and just look for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Fennelly, seconded by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? That is unanimous. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Good night.